Then it's a very special live Music Tuesday appearance from folk singer, songwriter Livingston Taylor. He's joining us alongside documentary filmmaker Bill Lichtenstein ahead of a special concert at City Winery in Boston this Friday to help fund Bill's documentary on gaps in child social welfare programs designed to support vulnerable kids. All that and more ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Primary voters in Colorado, New York, Utah, and South Carolina are going to the polls today. NPR's Giles Snyder reports on some of the key contests to watch.
In Colorado, several contested primaries for the U.S. House are on the ballot, including a race that features the controversial two-term Representative Lauren Boebert. Boebert switched to districts to run for Ken Buck's open seat following his decision to step down. She's facing a crowded Republican field. In New York, Democratic Congressman Jamal Bowman is facing a strong challenger in George Latimer. The race has highlighted divisions within the party over the Israel-Hamas war. South Carolina is holding runoff elections. The race for the state's 3rd congressional district pits a Donald Trump-backed candidate against one endorsed by South Carolina's Republican governor. And in Utah, Republican voters will decide on a successor to the retiring Senator Mitt Romney. Giles Snyder, NPR News.
President Biden and former President Donald Trump are getting ready for their debate on Thursday. NPR's Mara Eliason reports both candidates are hoping to shake up a race that is essentially tied in recent polls.
The Trump camp, realizing it set expectations for Biden way too low by attacking the president as senile, is now pushing without evidence the idea that if Biden performs well, it's because he's taken performance-enhancing drugs. The Biden campaign is hoping Trump's performance reminds voters why they used to think the former president was too extreme and chaotic. Both candidates will also focus on the economy, the number one issue for voters. Expect Trump to blame Biden for high prices and Biden to point to higher wages and lower unemployment. Mara Eliason, NPR News.
Very heavy storms are pushing into Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio this morning, dropping a lot of rain. The Midwest has been dealing with powerful storms and record flooding. More than 20 counties in Iowa are under disaster declarations. More than 15 inches of rain fell there in 2 days, sending rivers over their banks. NPR's Rebecca Hersher reports South Dakota also got record rainfall.
7 inches of rain fell in parts of South Dakota over the course of just 2 days last week. That's the most rain in the more than 130 years people have been keeping records. As the runoff from those storms makes its way downstream, rivers are cresting and flooding homes and destroying bridges, dams, and levees. Climate scientists have warned for decades that such heavy rainstorms are getting more common. As the Earth has heated up, the amount of rain falling during the region's heaviest storms has increased by 25 to 45%. That's making flooding more frequent. The upper Midwest also experienced catastrophic flooding just 5 years ago. Rebecca Hersher, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow is down 200 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The jury in the Karen Reed murder trial expected to begin deliberations today. Closing arguments from prosecutors and the defense were slow to get underway this morning because a juror has stepped away from the case. The circumstances not immediately clear, but it's the third juror to step aside from this case since the trial began in late April. At the start of the trial, Judge Beverly Cannoni had seated multiple alternates, so a jury of 12 will still decide the case. After that comes the jury instructions from the judge. Prosecutors claim that Reed struck and killed her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, with her SUV outside a home in Canton. That took place in January 2022. Reed's lawyers argue that their client was framed as part of a wide-reaching cover-up. A lot of eyes, a lot of ears on this case. Blame it on the rain. New Bedford's public beaches have been closed to swimming since Sunday. Heavy rain means runoff from nearby streets, which means more bacteria. The city says sewer overflow could also be a factor, and on Nantucket, harmful algae blooms are reported in 4 ponds on the island by a comet, Capewam, Gibbs, and Hummock. In sports, Red Sox Blue Jays Game 2 of their series at Fenway tonight. In the forecast this Tuesday, it's a hazy, hot and Henry day. Sunny 90 degrees today. Increasing clouds overnight tonight, low 72. Then more of the same tomorrow. Temperatures back around 90. It's 80 degrees right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card, Venture X. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Details at CapitalOne.com. And the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Marjorie's applauding for herself.
I am. I always
again.
applaud for myself, Jim.
Okay,
You got to start the excitement.
If you
know what I
won't
mean?
do it, who will?
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Livingston Taylor is going to join us to perform in roughly 30 minutes. Some additional programming notes before we get started. We will not be at the library tomorrow. We're going to be on tape for our annual staff retreat. Very excited about that, Jen. We'll have a wonderful breakfast over at the Lennox. However, if the Supreme Court does issue an immunity ruling for regarding former President Trump, we will be live at 89.7 at 11 o'clock discussing that. And on Thursday, I'm very excited about this. Doris Kearns Goodwin will be with us again. She's going to join us live in Studio 3 to talk about the history of televised presidential debates, of course, ahead of Thursday night's Trump-Biden debate. Then we'll be back here at the library on Friday with Live Music Friday from BAMS Fest and more. Good morning, Jim.
Show's almost over.
It's almost over.
A little long there, Marjorie,
Well,
if you know what I mean.
I know it annoys you.
Any
when I
more
go on
announcements
for
to
more
make?
than one sentence, Jim. Do you want to get the extra sentence tomorrow?
I would like to get the extra sentence, actually, for a few days.
I'll put in a word for
Thank you.
You're
Talk to the
welcome.
boss. So, as you know, Joe Biden and Donald Trump will face off in that first debate, the earliest ever in presidential politics, on Thursday night. We talked with medical ethicist Art Kaplan yesterday about the mental acuity issues surrounding both candidates. As you know, Joe Biden's 81, Trump is 78. We should be able to speak candidly about their age and how cognitive decline may affect their ability to do their jobs, as evidenced by Trump's own retelling of his self-described brilliant performance on that cognitive memory test back in 2020.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV. Okay, that's very good.
Now, let me just speak for myself. I want my presidents to be able to memorize person, woman, man, camera, TV. That's all I need to know. But if you've been paying attention, you notice that both men have had verbal slip-ups, some slurs over the past few months. So the number to call or text is 877-301-8970. Should we require cognitive testing of major party candidates, or do some of you think in this instance it's ageism? But given also, even if we were to do it, how baked in the support for both candidates seems to be, would it even matter to the voters? In my view, it should. The number is 877-301-8970. By the way, it's pretty clear that legally you couldn't mandate this. When I said required, there was some decision, I think, out of California about some additional criterion. Disclosing your tax forms to be on the presidential primary ballot. And the determination was the Supreme Court lays out all of the qualifications to be president of the United States, born here, at least 35, et cetera. What the hell is going on?
Poll and voters being questioned about their concerns about Joe Biden over and over and over again, including Democrats. They're worried about his being too old. And they're worried about he's had a stutter all his life, and I think he probably speaks more carefully and sometimes less clearly than he should because of that. But I'm not going to talk about people's speech difficulties.
Well, you're
Jim.
not running for president,
I'm not
Marjorie.
running for president, but I did have to go to speech school so I could continue up here.
Another
It
station.
was another station. I was there for 6 months every week
Yeah,
practicing.
She did.
La 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 la.
She graduated in the middle of her class, by the way, I should just say.
Yeah. But I was concerned about people's physical health as well. I was just looking it up before we went on the air. Remember when Tip O'Neill, this is dating me, but when Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House, he died of colon cancer.
Yeah.
There was extensive, they had diagrams, everything else, talking about his colon cancer in the globe. I mean, he was very upfront about that. And he was not running for President of the United States or was President of the United States. And we could think back to Paul Tsongas, who was a great senator from Massachusetts, who I don't think was entirely truthful about his cancer.
He wasn't.
And he ran for president. And, that wasn't right either, I don't think.
Well, by the way, not only was he not fully transparent, I'm a great admirer of Senator Tsongas.
Me too.
He would have died in his first term had he been elected president. But we're not, Marjorie's talking about physical stuff. I'm concerned about the fact, as we said to Chuck Todd, we said to John King last week, we in the media seem to be totally unable to discuss cognitive issues, mental capacity when it comes to these candidates. Particularly, I'm sorry, the notion that people are more concerned with Joe Biden's age, and he is old, and I'm concerned about it, as compared to Donald Trump. Just listen to this for a second. We played this the other day. This is almost like made up. Here's Trump speaking before supporters in Nevada about his supposed conversation with a boat manufacturer about choosing between electrocution and getting attacked by sharks. Here's Donald Trump.
I said, so there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards, or here. Do I get electrocuted if the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery,
Sure.
the boat is sinking? Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, nobody's ever asked me that question.
Nobody's ever asked me that question, sir, is what you're supposed to say.
That's
no,
right.
He's in good shape. I'm comfortable with him being on the presidential ballot. But in fairness, here's a little bit.
Yep.
And by the way, this was a year ago, so a year has since
That's
passed.
right.
This is President Biden at a press conference in Vietnam in 2023 when he was pressed about China's relationship with the United States.
And look, nobody likes having celebrated international meetings
Okay.
if you don't know what you want at the meeting, if you don't have a game plan. He may have a game plan. He just hasn't shared it with me. But I tell you what, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go to bed.
I think that's a wise choice.
Well,
Oh, my God.
you ever see those commercials? If you watch old age cable, and people that watch cable basically, and see whether it's MSNBC, Fox, or CNN, are basically over 50, over 60. I think the average viewer may be older than that, in their 70s. See that commercial of two women coming down the aisle in the supermarket, and they see this guy coming toward them they both know, but the woman is shaking her head. Is it Hank?
Well, it's a
Is it
Prevagen
Stan?
commercial,
It's a
isn't it?
Prevagen-
Yeah,
It's a
I've seen
Prevagen
that.
commercial. So, but she finally figures out. The other woman says it's Fred. She goes, "Oh, Fred." She's so relieved. I mean, and she's like in her 50s. This woman. So you figure that neither of these guys could probably remember anybody's name anymore, or they have great difficulty. That's why they mix up the people that are running different.
Well,
countries
also, I mean, are you not going to be concerned when Joe Biden turns to Dana Bash and says, "Who's that guy?" I mean. 877-301-89. I know you Trump supporters don't like us making fun of Trump's mental acuity, and you Biden supporters feel the same way about Joe Biden, but you are in denial if you don't think this is an issue. And we're, by the way, the enemy is us, a la Pogo. The press, for some reason, is uncomfortable talking about this stuff, other than they're uncomfortable talking about. Let's take some calls. Lauren in Boston. Oh, wait a second. Lauren, sit tight. Marjorie's smiling.
I say one of our texters thinks
Please.
what we need to do is have a quiz show instead of a debate, kind of a Jeopardy kind of thing going on up at the stage for the first
Don't
few
you
minutes.
think, by the way, a lot of people write in these op-eds, Lauren, we're going to get to in a minute, America and you and Marjorie, Jim, are much too focused on performance rather than content. I had to say, well, I hope there's a lot of content, and I'm sure there will be. Dana Bash and Jake Tapper are both really smart anchors. They're the two moderators Thursday night. It is about, to me, how they present themselves. Is Trump so unhinged that it's out of control, and is Biden sharp and able to demonstrate that he can be the leader of the free world for 4.5 more years?
I think this is huge. This debate is much earlier than it typically is.
Earliest
Another
ever.
one in September. But I think this is huge. I think if Biden is sharp and clear and crisp, he'll win. If he's not, he's
I
in
agree with you.
huge trouble.
Okay.
And if Trump starts screaming and yelling and carrying on, which he probably won't. He was at some, I mean, he's aware of how the screaming and yelling and interrupting
In the first
didn't work.
debate, yeah.
And so he's talked
we'll
about
see.
how he's going to try to be
Okay.
calm and not yell.
Before we take Lauren, I'm going to read 5 words to you, and I want you to repeat them back to me in order,
Okay,
Marjorie.
right.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV. Go ahead.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
You too can be president of the United States. Let's go to, well, obviously some of them
Where
feel
did
the
that
same
come
way.
from? Is that a test?
That's the Trump, I just did it. It's
That's
the
the
Trump
test?
cognitive test.
Wow.
When he said he aced it.
Oh,
Yeah.
that wasn't very hard.
Oh, really? I think that may have been the point. Okay, let's get to the calls. Thank you. Lauren in
Lauren in
Boston, you're
Boston.
first. What's up?
Good morning.
And to you.
I'm a perpetual caller.
We're glad you are. What's up?
So 2 things. One is, yes, I do believe we should have cognitive evals. I also believe we should have psych evals. I'm
with you.
I don't mean to. I mean this in all sincerity. I think that there's some mental illness with Trump that
I do too.
is alarming.
I do too.
So there's that piece. And I do understand, I've called and made this point before, and I'm going to make it again if you allow me. But there was a guest, I don't remember his title, but he worked most recently with Biden and on your show, and he was very clear that Biden was very sharp. And I do want to impress that we have backup plans, right? There's a vice president who's more than capable. And honestly, sometimes I go to bed at 9 o'clock at night, and I'm far away from 80. So.
Lauren, can I tell you, with all due respect, the comfort that if a president is unable to perform because of cognitive decline, that he, in this case, has a vice president ready to go is so wildly unsatisfying to me. And it's not because I don't respect Kamala Harris, by the way. I'm not voting for the vice president. I'm voting for Donald Trump or Joe Biden or some people for RFK Jr. And I want to make sure that person is able to do this. But Lauren, thank you. Lauren, before you go, one last question, because you're a good caller. Would you rather be electrocuted or eaten by a shark? What about it?
Hold on, I do have a question for you, Jim, before you hang up, if you would allow me.
Please.
So I hear you about the VP backup plan. I get that. But I think the question begs, before I think about my answer, what would you rather have in office? A backup plan of a very competent Kamala Harris, or someone like Trump, who is both cognitively challenged?
Actually, I'll answer your question. I'd rather be electrocuted. Thank you, Lauren, for the call. We appreciate it.
You know, it's interesting, isn't it, that we're debating this, and probably the GOP's favorite president of all was Ronald Reagan, who had Alzheimer's.
He did.
At the end of his term in office, and his wife was kind of buttressing him up in many different circumstances. Jaffe from Amesbury, thank you for calling.
Hey, Jaffe.
Yeah, hey, how's it going?
Good.
I think we're misled a little bit in this discussion because we don't think much about the kinds of cognitive abilities.
Yeah.
There are whether or not you get your dates right or remember names, which is really not so important. And the really important things are things like judgment and consistency and seeing the big picture. Presidents surround themselves with lots of people with facts and figures. They don't need to have all of that in their heads.
I'm not, excuse me, I'm not advocating for a memory test. That was Donald Trump that did the memory test. I totally agree with you, but I would assume experts know what matters and what doesn't matter in terms of being the CEO, a leader of this country. So I'm with you. You got to pick the right things and focus on them, right?
Right.
Okay, we're in agreement. Jaffe, thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it. What are you laughing about?
Well, this isn't very nice, but I'll read it anyway.
Well, then, especially read it.
Tamara from Seattle. Read the debate. It occurred to me a power move for Biden would be to bend down and pretend to tie his shoes. Trump has not seen his shoes for over a decade.
That's really unkind.
It's not very nice.
No, it's
I
not
anticipated
nice.
that.
Well, you actually amplified it by the non-niceness. By
And
reading
here's
it,
Andrew in Westford. If I weren't an American, I'd feel bad for us. We've fallen so far, maybe it's from someplace else. We've fallen so far, both of these candidates shouldn't be running, but here we go again. Remember when we argued about Bush versus Kerry, Bush versus Gore, even Obama versus Romney? All of those people are far ahead still of our current crop of candidates. Holy moly.
877-301-8970 is our number. Chuck in New Hampshire, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, how are you today?
We're excellent. Thank you for calling.
So, first of all, I think it's abhorrent that we have to be talking about two men who are so old running for president. I mean, there's no excuse for this. We have plenty of brilliant, younger men and women who could be running for president. And the parties have determined that these are our two best choices. I mean, that's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. As far as the age thing goes, I can only imagine the Supreme Court getting involved with this and saying, well, getting old is a disability. So you can't say that because of this disability, they can't run for office.
Well, by the way, Chuck, let me be clear. Two things. One, as I said, I think constitutionally you couldn't require this kind of testing. I just urge it. And secondly, what was your thing about the Supreme Court? What did you just say about the Supreme Court?
That I could hear them equating it to getting older and having issues with memory, etc., which everyone who's older has. Is a disability.
Well, but no, your point was about disqualification. No one is arguing, particularly me, that if you fail, whatever that means, a cognitive test, you should be disqualified. The information should be provided to the voters. And if the voters say, I have all the information I need, for example, like a jury verdict in an insurrection case, which is not going to happen, and I still choose to vote for that person, that's their right. I'm not saying it should be legally disqualifying. I'm just saying we have a right to know, and right now we don't. Chuck, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
Before we go to the break, here's a clip of Donald Trump at his campaign rally in Philadelphia. He was talking about what President Biden would be doing during the debate, being jacked up for the evening. Here is Trump.
So a little before debate time, he gets a shot in the ass, and that's... They want to strengthen him up. So he comes out. He'll come out. I say he'll come out all jacked up, right? All jacked up.
Oh, my gosh.
Livingston Taylor, what did you say before? You wish they were both taking performance-enhancing drugs? Wasn't that a quote? I don't want to misquote you. Is that it?
Yeah.
We got it. Livingston Taylor votes for them both taking PEDs before the debate. That man who just spoke will be performing in about 10 minutes, so do not go away.
We are talking about the cognitive state of Joe Biden and Donald Trump ahead of Thursday night's debate. We're going to keep talking about this for a while longer. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Your neighborhood, your stories.
I'm digital producer Elena Everwine.
I'm editor Jack Doyle.
Do you have a tip?
Want to offer feedback?
Invite us to an event?
Or want to participate in a listening session?
Feel free to reach out to us.
Email gbhnewsconnect@wgbh.org.
gbhnewsconnect@wgbh.org. We'd love to hear from you.
Making you part of our newsroom. GBH News Connect at wgbh.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Their summer exhibitions explore the power of portrait photography to document LGBTQIA+ stories, and Isabella's archives on queer experience in Boston in her era. On view now. And National Grid, helping businesses work toward a sustainable future by offering guidance on heat pump solutions. Learn more about how heat pumps can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions at ngrid.com/future.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. In about 10-15 minutes, Livingston Taylor is going to be performing and talking with us with a friend of his who's doing a documentary about how governments, including ours in Massachusetts, treat or mistreat our kids. In the meantime, we are talking about whether or not there can't be requirements, but there should be strong urgings that candidates for president, both starting with these, but regardless of age in the future, take cognitive tests, psychological evaluations made public so that voters have an opportunity to decide how relevant those factors are based on fact and analysis when they cast their votes. 877-301-8970.
Chip from Groton says the real problem with the shark story is that Trump thinks that if he sinks in the ocean on an electric power boat, he would be electrocuted. That's a very good point. Paul from Worcester says they're both too old to run for president. Maybe shuffling for president would be a better description. And then Jay in Brighton says electing a president is like getting married. You are not just marrying the person, but you are marrying their family. One candidate has a group of professionals, the other has a group of lunatic conspiracy theorists.
Can I say one thing about that guy that called at the end there about how do you end up with these kind of candidates? I think if you listen to the show, you know that Margie and I both think that Joe Biden is wildly accomplished, has done some incredibly important things, climate action being at the top of the list with other things. But it doesn't change the fact the American people don't want either of them. The American people didn't want either of the candidates in 2016. In fact, the only candidate, I believe I'm right about this, Marjorie, in polling in 2016, polling history, who was more unpopular than Hillary Clinton as a presidential candidate was Donald Trump.
Right.
So there's something wrong with our system, which we'll address at some point post-November, at least attempt to address. But that's sort of a fundamental question, how you end up with candidates that nobody really wants.
I really blame the Democrats for not telling Joe Biden, that's it. They could have done that.
Who is that? What do you mean the Democrats? Who is that?
I think
voters allowed him to win primaries.
Yes, I know, but you get. I think the power brokers, the Democratic Party should have gotten together early on and just. We were talking about this 3 years ago, right?
Uh-huh. Well, how about the power brokers in the Republican Party, most of whom originally thought that Donald Trump was responsible and should pay a price for an insurrection attempt, and who now couldn't wrap themselves more closely around his body? I mean, I'm serious. I
know. You know, they had a thing somewhere I saw yesterday about the people that are in contention to be the vice president with Donald Trump. All of them, all three of them, Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, and Burgum from North Dakota, they all said horrible things about Donald Trump, and now they're on bended knee trying to become his vice president. Patty from Brookline.
I'm sure their kids are really proud of them, by the way. I'm serious. I mean, how do you face your children?
I
Patty.
don't know.
Hi,
Patty from Brookline. Hi.
Hey.
I'm not going to answer that question.
You don't have to.
But what I am going to do is to urge you all, and I'll share some of them with you, but I work in dementia education, and I also worked on Capitol Hill for a long time, so I have an interesting view or perspective on all this stuff. But I think that one of the ways to make people more comfortable about talking about these issues is to use the data. And so when I say to people right now, 1 in 9 people 65 and older have dementia. That's just a fact. And the greatest predictor of dementia is age. And so the older you get, the higher the risk.
How high is the risk at 85, Patty?
I don't know that number off the top of my head, because I tend to work with younger people. But you can look; it's right on the Alzheimer's Association site. So, but I think that if you ground this in the data, it's less. It doesn't sound as ageist.
That's actually that's a very good point. That's a very good point. We'll take the criticism. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Okay, I'm trying to be fair here, but I do think it's important.
I think you make a wonderful point. Go ahead.
Then I want someday for you guys.
Oh, I didn't hear that. We're losing you. Say it again, please.
We lost you.
I'm sorry. I'd like you to do a show on how to prevent dementia. We know how to do that.
Patty, why don't you stay on hold?
I've never met anybody who wants to get it.
Of course. Why don't you stay on hold? The connection's horrible, and we'll take your number, and we'll be in touch with you. By the way, our colleagues have looked at Patty's suggestion, research from the Alzheimer Association, After age 65, which is what Patty mentioned, the risk of Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. That after age 85, the risk reaches nearly a third. So Joe Biden would be 85 in his fourth year, and Donald Trump would be 82 in his fourth year.
Yeah, of course, the ridiculousness of this whole debate thing on Thursday night is it really says nothing about your ability to run the country, I don't think.
What do you mean?
Well, because that's not how you don't get up in a debate in any kind of negotiation with any foreign leader or in sitting in your office deciding with your colleagues how you're going to handle whether it's inflation or whether it's Israel-Gaza. It's just a performance.
I don't agree. I think if Tapper and Bash do as good, they're really both really smart, competent anchors. And depending on the questions are and what the follow-up is, I think you get a sense of how sharp thinking, how focused, how decent the judgment is of a leader or a would-be leader. I mean, you can be right, but I don't think you're always right.
Well, here's a great example. A lot of people thought Al Gore was a real jerk because he was smirking during the debate with W. Bush.
That's true.
Which do you think would have been the better president?
Well, yeah, I agree.
He smirked the whole time. His father was looking at his watch. That was
Bush's father,
very, very bad. He shouldn't have done that. That lost him the debate. So these debates get decided on kind of crazy things that I don't think have that much to do with someone's ability.
Well, I think this one's going to be, I know I probably say this every 4 years with you, this one's going to be different. It usually is the big mistake, but I think how they perform, again, considering their age, is almost as important as the policy things. Even though, don't you want to hear Donald Trump answer a question about what he's going to do about January 6th defendants, climate change?
Yes,
Joe
I do.
Biden answer a question about immigration, and I think he's got a good answer, but let's hear him say it.
So our staff member says, remember the fly that landed on Pence's snowy white hair during the last debate?
I do remember.
I lost focus for a solid 10 minutes. That was absolutely wild.
Good.
That was like when Joe Kennedy was giving the State of the Union address.
Oh, he had the thing on his face.
Younger congressman
response.
He had a little, he had a little smear of Vaseline, and all anybody could talk about was the Vaseline on Joe Kennedy's lips.
Remember what show he was on the next day, where one of the two hosts asked him about it repeatedly?
He was on our show.
And who asked him about it repeatedly?
I did.
You did, exactly. I'm talking policy. Marjorie's talking Vaseline. I mean, that sort of sums up the relationship, I think, pretty well.
Stephanie in Attleboro, thank you for calling.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, it's Stephanie. No problem.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to share, I had a benign tumor removed from my pituitary and my brain about 7 years ago.
Yikes.
Benign, so no worries.
Good.
But I wanted to share, I had to go and take the neuropsych test about 2 years later just to make sure that there wasn't any damage. The test is incredibly difficult, and I think most people over 40 would not do exceptionally well. I mean, I passed, and it was fine, but it's not like it's 5 words. It's like 25 words. It's like 100 numbers. There's all these different things that they do. And so when I think about anyone taking the test, I'm like, wow, they're actually not going to find anyone that will do incredibly well over 30, 35.
So having taken it yourself, do you think it would be appropriate to have, it so happens we have older candidates this year, but any year have major party candidates take the test before voters cast the ballot?
I think it would be, because it's not based on anything cultural. It's not based on anything religious. I don't think it's ableist. You understand what I'm trying to say? I don't think it would block anybody from passing it for any other reason except for the fact that there's something wrong.
Stephanie, you talked about the ones where you have to put remember the increasing numbers of groups of numbers. They start with 731, and then you go to 73165. You have to remember them. You have to remember them backwards. Then you have to put things. I've taken these. They are hard.
Why have you taken them?
Because I was in this nationwide estrogen study.
You were?
Yeah, they're hard. You have to group things. What do these things have in common? They're very similar to IQ tests that you have.
How'd you do?
When you're young. Well, I guess I passed.
What happens if you don't pass?
I don't know. But it was part of this estrogen thing to see if estrogen hormones affects women in different ways and all that kind of stuff. So I'm with you. They are difficult, and they are a lot about memory, right? A lot.
Absolutely about memory.
Yeah.
How's your health now, by the way, if I may ask?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Great.
I was very lucky.
Great.
Very lucky.
We're happy to hear it. Thanks for your call. We really appreciate your contribution. Thanks so much.
Yeah, what they do is they'll say, okay, here's the numbers 531, then they'll add 5312, then they'll say 53129, then you have to try to get them backwards. They're not that easy. Anyway, that's enough for that. We're moving on to some great music. After a quick break.
We should remind people, by the way, we said it before, speaking of the debate, Doris Kearns Goodwin is going to join us in studio on Thursday.
I know, I'm so excited.
Talk about the history of televised debates in American history, presidential debates. We're pretty excited.
Okay, after a quick break, ahead of a special show this Friday at City Winery Boston, we're going to talk and hear from singer-songwriter Livingston Taylor and filmmaker Bill Lichtenstein. They are next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. And if you want to watch this up,
manipulating clouds to reflect sunlight into space. It's a futuristic idea to deal with climate change.
A lot of the increased conversation around these approaches is because people are starting to really worry.
But a new study shows that engineering the clouds could have unintended consequences. That is next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Emerson Colonial Theater, presenting Kristen Chenoweth in the world premiere musical The Queen of Versailles, with music and lyrics by Stephen Schwartz, playing this summer, July 16th through August 25th. Tickets at emersoncolonialtheater.com. And the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We are tentatively not at the library tomorrow because we have our annual retreat. Thank you. However, if the Supreme Court issues the immunity decision at 10, we'll do an hour at 11. So figure that out. It's time for a very special live music Tuesday with one of our favorites, actually, Livingston Taylor. He is joined by journalist and documentary filmmaker Bill Lichtenstein. Stein, thank you. Whose upcoming project, years in the making, is titled Broken. And Marjorie and I watched excerpts this morning. It is really powerful. It's a film about government and systems designed to help children in need that too often fall far short, in some cases fatally so. The two of them appearing today comes in advance of a special concert to help raise money for the film Broken. This Friday, 7:30 at the terrific City Winery Boston. It's called Livingston Taylor for the Children. citywinery.com. I went for the first time a few weeks ago. It's a great venue, /Boston. citywinery.com/Boston for tickets, or brokenthefilm.org for information on the documentary. But before we talk, to help us get started, Livingston was kind enough to start us off with the song Welcome, Liv.
Thank you, Jim. Marjorie, great to see you both.
Yes.
Great to be here with Bill. Would you mind if I took a moment and did a little sunshine pop? All right, here we go. Carole King, Jerry Goffin. My tears have fallen 'cause you've taken her away. Although it really hurts me so, there's something that I've gotta say. Take good care of my baby. Don't ever make her blue. Just tell her that you love her and that you're thinking of her in everything you say and do. Oh, take good care of my baby. Don't ever make her cry. Just let your love surround her. Paint rainbows all around her. Don't let her see a cloudy sky. Once upon a time, that little girl was mine. If I'd been true, I know she'd never be with you. So take good care of my baby. Be just as kind as you can be. And if you should discover that you don't really love her, send my baby back home to me.
The great Livingston Taylor. That was wonderful.
How sweet is that songwriting?
Oh, my God.
God. By the way, I teach college, and I talk a lot of songwriting when I'm teaching. And, okay, microphone in a happy
Perfect
place
now.
for
Yes,
you?
perfect
Okay,
now.
now I got it.
I know
Yeah.
you're new to this,
And
so it's okay.
You think?
Thanks.
Anyhow, I teach songwriting, but the assembly of that song, the way it's the right size, just the incredible discipline that went into that writing. Ooh, that's fun to play.
The performer matters a little bit too, Livingston Taylor. Do you know?
But again, I'm able to play a song that sounds good because it's so beautifully assembled.
Agreed.
Remember, a great song doesn't make me sound good. It makes the audience singing along with me sound good.
And that was with
beautiful.
Carole King and her husband that we don't hear that much about. They were young songwriters together, right?
Yes,
Before
Carole King and Jerry Goff.
Yeah, before her career just skyrocketed.
And Bobby V had the hit on that, and I think it was 1962.
Yeah.
Yes, because occasionally, guess what? I know this will come as a surprise to you people, but I get tired of 2024 occasionally and like to drift back.
Yes.
Bill, what do you want to sing? Go ahead. What do you? Okay, you're not going to sing. So tell us about. We mentioned this benefit June 28th at the City Winery, Boston. City Winery, Boston is the place to benefit your documentary, which is in the works. We saw part of it this morning, called Broken. Let's play a drop of an excerpt we heard. This is Sarah Perkins describing the night DCF'd knocked is probably an understatement, on her door and took her kids, even though they ultimately, just a month later, found there was no risk at the home at all. Here she is.
We were just falling asleep. It's 1 a.m, and we hear a loud banging at the door. And we open the door, and they say, "You need to let us in. We're from the DCF, Department of Children and Families. You have to let us in." And then eventually we got our lawyer to talk to them, and our lawyer then calls us and says, "Listen, if you don't let them in, they're going to break down your door, and they're going to take your kids, and you'll probably get arrested in criminal charges. You have to let them in."
And when she describes what she says to her 2 young children while they're about to be taken away in the middle of the night by people they don't know, it is the most heartbreaking thing one can imagine. Fill in some blanks. Tell us a little bit more about your project.
The project looks at the state of the Massachusetts child protection, foster care, and family court systems set against child welfare nationally. It's a story that I've wanted to do for some time, but couldn't find the right way into it because it's a very obviously heavy, topic. Fortunately, I crossed paths with at that point, 22-year-old. She was just finishing up her master's degree at BU, journalism student. Who was reporting on the story and had already talked to 40, 50 families, and just a remarkably good reporter, and asked her what she was going to do with the project. She didn't have any plans, so I asked her if she would want to make a documentary about it. So for the last 2 years, daily, I followed her reporting on the story in the kind of tradition of Me Too or Spotlight or All the President's Men, trying to unravel the story before the viewer's eyes, as she's been reporting it.
You've been doing this your whole life, though. I mean, while this is your current project, for decades you've been working on the protection or lack of protection that governments provide for kids.
Well, I got involved with media when I was 14, working at WBCN. But then when I was at ABC News in the early 80s, spent 9 months undercover in Oklahoma, where they had a system where children, if they couldn't live at home for any reason, were put into these state institutions, and abuse and deaths. And because of our reporting, completely overhauled the whole system. So I've stayed interested, did a Guggenheim Fellowship looking at child welfare. And so, I've had a long-term interest.
Bill, I'm really curious that Massachusetts, where we do have a considerable amount of money and we're a very wealthy state, we're also a very secretive state. Are we in worse shape than other states because we have horrible secrecy in Massachusetts, much worse than other states? Or is it a money thing, or what is it about?
I think it's a combination. I think there are about 30 states where the entire child welfare system, like Massachusetts, is unconditionally secret.
Yeah.
From the first phone call that there might be a problem with the child, through whatever a judge does at the end of the day, it's not just secret. You can't get the names of the attorneys. You cannot get the judges. The attorneys are forbidden to discuss it. So that secrecy, I think, creates a system where there's very little accountability.
Yes.
You add to that an awful lot of money, and you have a problem. Massachusetts has remained for decades among the worst states in the country, unbelievably, counterintuitively, on almost every metric in terms of the number of children's deaths, how they're treated in foster care. So it seemed like an important story because we have the resources, and still you have the significant problem.
Marjorie would never say this, but I have to say some of the most brilliant columns you ever wrote in your days at the Herald were about
thank you, Jim.
No, I'm serious, about the exact same thing that Bill's reporting. Why do you care about this, Liv Taylor? Why are you doing this benefit on Friday?
It seems that I don't personally have children, and so the notion of caring for young people, of taking proactive intervention early in all child development and all strata of children, is just the most efficient thing you can do for a future that's going to be brighter.
Marjorie and I were talking this morning. What did you say, like a 17-year-old kid who means well, who has no idea what they're doing? In the Michael Moore film, remember, was it in France? They send somebody out to your house who's got skills in parenting, that meets with the prospective parents, and they learn the kinds of things that many of us as young parents, despite being well-meaning, had no idea what to do.
And you look into the Haley Montgomery case.
Harmony,
Harmony Montgomery case, which was a screw-up in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire. Tell us briefly about what you discovered.
What we discovered was, first, that no reporter, as far as we can tell, in the history of the state has ever gone to the court and said, we want you to give us access to a child protection case. It just had not been done. And in the case of Harmony Montgomery, you had a five-year-old child inexplicably given custody given to a father who had only seen her for 40 hours at that point, who had a long, violent criminal record, had done time for shooting somebody in the face during a drug deal gone bad. But she ended up in his custody, and then nobody looked in for years. And she disappeared and has ended up dead. Obviously, the question is, how could that have happened? What went on in that custody hearing that the judge decided, despite all that, to give custody to that father? The answer is, we can't tell you. It's secret. And it got to the point where Governor Sununu wrote a letter to the Massachusetts courts because the father was living in New Hampshire. That's where she was murdered. And New Hampshire's obviously concerned. So he wrote a letter to, Governor Sununu wrote a letter to the Mass courts saying, you've got to give us the transcript of what went on in the custody case so people can know. And the answer is no, it's secret. So we went into court. We filed an initial motion, which was turned down, and we appealed it. And unbelievably, the Supreme Court leapfrogged it over the appeal process and voted to hear the case directly right to the Supreme Court.
The SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court, the highest court.
Massachusetts. Yeah, not the U.S., but Massachusetts, sorry. And so there'll be oral arguments in October. We believe for the first time it will help open up the system. I think, like with any case that goes on, there's no perfect, there's murder cases, there's all kinds of situations where there are problems, but at least the public can find out what's going on. And we believe that once you lift that veil, it will go a long way to ameliorating the problem.
By the way, the 9-minute excerpt that Margie and I watched this morning that was just otherworldly powerful, is that on brokenthefilm.org? Can people watch that?
Yes.
They can?
Yes.
So go to brokenthefilm.org. Again, Livingston Taylor is doing a fundraiser to benefit this film in the making. The film's called Broken. Friday night, 7:30 at the City Winery, Boston. You can get tickets at citywinery.com/Boston. Now, can I ask you, I want to ask you if you know who this guy is. You were mentioned BCN.
Yes.
We got this tape. I don't know where it came from. It's something from years and years and years ago. Can we hear this, please?
Hi, this is Liv Taylor. And,
Oh, no.
I'm having a nice day in Boston.
You sound like you're 11, Livingston. How old were you when you did that?
I was 11.
Is that how you guys met?
We've crossed paths early.
Certainly our paths crossed in those days.
What you do? Were you doing spots for BCN in the
I
old
was
days?
doing whatever I could to get noticed. It's a trait of adolescence.
Yeah. And Bill, what were you doing at BCN?
I was in an alternative educational program in Newton where we were supposed to volunteer one day a week. So I started answering the listener line.
Oh.
And soon after, Danny Schechter, who was doing 2 broadcasts a day with no help, said, here, take this tape recorder, go to this demonstration and ask people, why are you here? Which is, of course, the perfect question for a 14-year-old who's never done an interview.
Exactly.
So I started doing news. And then by the time I was 15, I had my own show on the weekends.
Oh, my gosh.
And was
When you were how old?
15.
Jesus.
Isn't that
Okay, go
great?
ahead.
So it was just, amazing time, yeah.
So Danny Schechter, people call him the news dissector,
Yes,
right? Danny
yeah.
Schechter, the news dissector. So what was the listener line, please?
The listener line was, in those days, before Google, people would call the radio station with any question. My roommate took some bad LSD. I got my draft notice. Is there a pizza place open after midnight? Yeah. And the disc jockeys the announcers were getting so many calls that they couldn't do their shows. So Charles Lockwood era got the idea of setting up a phone line answered by volunteers, and they would literally say, ask us anything. And they had lists, it's almost unbelievable to think, lists of people driving around the country who were looking for riders to split gas, and people who needed, and so that was the listener line, and it was known as the all-purpose question line.
Livingston Taylor, I wondered, in the days when radio kind of ruled and made and broke careers, how different was that than the business now for young artists coming up?
The greatest change in the business now is that when I started, you had to find somebody who had a record pressing machine. And no, I'm serious. These were very capital intensive pieces of equipment, and you had to take somebody music. And by the way, that person was not your mother. Everybody will love you, honey. You take it to a generally old male who was smoking a cigar and saying, I don't think I hear a hit here. But if they did think that they heard a hit, then they would squeeze you into vinyl. Then that vinyl got taken to record stations. And if you got somebody to spin it and you got an audience reaction, you were on your way. But it was this notion that you can go directly on an internet, be available to 4 billion people, get 7 likes, never mind that 3 of those likes you were related to and the other 4 want to have sex with you. This is not a career.
Sounds like a career to me, actually. So, one of the things I think you get as much joy from an audience as anybody I've ever met in my life. Is it the same for you today? I mean, last time we saw you, you had put out your 50th anniversary, something which was just totally beautiful.
Yeah,
I mean, totally beautiful. Is it still as good?
Yeah, it is. Not only is it good, it's better than it ever was.
Why?
Because I'm 73, and as I move through my 70s and am aware of the letting go of my strengths and my egos, which get shaved away, more and more I found the answer for aging.
Which is?
And the answer for aging is forgiveness. You forgive yourself and you forgive others. So I can play these chords and I can play them cleanly, and if you don't like them, it's okay. I know you mean
this.
I really
you're
mean
incredible.
it. It's okay.
I know.
By the way, if you don't like me, it's okay.
It is?
And the reason why is occasionally I don't like myself. So why should I chastise you for not liking me?
Well, I have to say I always like you, Livingston.
Well, I know,
Taylor.
and the feeling is mutual.
So before Livingston plays one more tune for us, but when should we expect this film?
It's going to hopefully be in festivals early next year, and then a limited theatrical release, and we're planning to roll it out through public television in 2025.
Your BCN thing was on public television,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. By the way, brokenthefilm.org, if you want to check on the progress, go to the thing. Marjorie will tell you this again, citywinery.com/Boston, Friday night at City Winery. What are you playing, Livingston?
I'm going to play a song post-COVID called Still a Hell of a Ride.
Fabulous.
I'm in, I'm on, I'm good, I'm set. Falling out of 50, but I ain't dead yet. Ain't scared of the devil we've already met. I got nothing bottled up inside. It's still a hell of a ride. I'm strong, I'm free, a full tank of gas. I could eat a plate of bitter, but I think I'll pass. Old man time wants to kick my ass, but I got a few places to hide. It's still a hell of a ride. How we doing for time? Pretty girl to kiss, $10 wine, lazy lane up the hill, pour in the bright moonshine. Well, there's a million stars, and they're shining for free. I'm drowning in that Dixie breeze. God, I'm glad I'm me. I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm on the scene, greener than a leprechaun's pecker in spring. Ready, set, go, I don't know a thing, but I'm leaving nothing left untried. It's still a hell of a ride. Marjorie and Jim, are you ready for me to wind this song up? Well, it's a hell of a ride.
Wonderful, wonderful Livingston Taylor.
Yeah.
We love you, Liv.
We have
really
been
do.
speaking, as Jim just said, and listening to Livingston.
Wait, Livingston wants to say something quick. What?
Yes, when in doubt, aim low. Remember that for your broadcast.
And Bill wants to say something
Before I go, I
quickly.
just want to mention the name of the reporter is Brooke Lewis, so we're following
glad
him.
we should have asked.
And Robert Sennett, Charlie Sennett's brother, is the executive producer of the
fabulous.
film. I know he's a friend of the show. So.
Great. We'll talk to Charlie about it too. Great to see you both.
That was
Thanks.
Livingston Taylor and documentary filmmaker Bill Lichtenstein. Bill's project is called Broken. You can find more info about it by going to brokenthefilm.org. That's brokenthefilm.org. Livingston Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The United States is dropping its pursuit of Julian Assange. The WikiLeaks founder has agreed to plead guilty to illegally obtaining and publishing classified materials in exchange for his release from a British prison. NPR's Kerry Johnson has been following the years-long stand. Assange is expected to return home to Australia following the proceedings. More primary.
The Israel-Hamas conflict exposed divisions for Democrats in the race, with Congressman Bowman, a progressive, forced to defend his more left-leaning position, questioning Israel's efforts in the war. Bowman's challenger, centrist George Latimer, the Westchester County executive, has said he's the pro-Israel candidate in the race. The primary contest for the district, which includes Bronx and Westchester counties, has drawn plenty of spending nationally.
Pointing the finger at the far right and the far left, President Macron said if either were to be elected, on urgency for Macron's centrists, which remain in third place heading into Sunday's first round of voting. Polls show a matchup between the far right and left-wing coalition in a July 7 runoff. Jordan Bardella is the 28-year-old leader of the populist right National Rally. He said, "We are ready," and pledged to tackle immigration and cost of living issues first. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. A new report out today finds Boston has the 4th worst traffic congestion in the country and the 8th worst in the world. Oy. GBH's Mark Hers has more.
The report on urban congestion in 2023 from traffic analytics company INRIX says if you drive the worst roads in the Boston area, you're losing 88 hours of your life to it yearly. Boston is also home to the 7th most congested roadway in the U.S. That's the stretch of I-93 headed out of the city, starting at the Zakim Bridge and heading all the way into southeast Mass. The peak there, usually at 3 p.m. In the U.S., only New York City, Chicago, and L.A. have worse traffic than Boston, with NYC even beating out Mexico City and London for the worst in the world. In Boston, I'm Mark Hers, GBH News 89.7.
Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey in Maryland today. The governor is at the Select USA 2024 Investment Summit, where she's part of a workforce development panel. She's also being a part of a roundtable discussion hosted by Deputy Secretary of Commerce Don Graves. Meanwhile, in Boston, Mayor Michelle Wu gives remarks at the opening of the Frog Pond Spray Pool on the Boston Common. Perfect day for that. It is 83 degrees in Boston already. Hazy, hot, and Henry. Going to be a hot night at the Ball Yard. Red Sox and Blue Jays play Game 2 of their series at Fenway tonight. And then we've got some increasing clouds rolling in overnight, low 72. And as I said, 83 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, with Schwab investing themes like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or pet passion. Over 40 themes to invest in. Learn more at schwab.com. And the Doris Duke Foundation.
You want to say something or not?
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Marjorie's eating. We just told Livingston Taylor how professional we were. Marjorie's eating. She's talking to Michael Curry. She's hugging Livingston Taylor.
I wasn't
we have a
being
show,
as professional
Marjorie.
as I should be.
You were not professional.
I'm trying to, I'm picking up my game right now.
Start all over.
Hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We will not be here tomorrow because we're having our annual staff retreat.
That is correct.
Which is going to be kind of fun, I hope. Unless there is a decision on the immunity of former President Trump from the Supreme Court tomorrow, and then we'll be back at 11 o'clock to talk about that. And on Thursday, Doris Kearns Goodwin, the great historian, will join us in Studio 3 to talk about the history of televised presidential debates ahead of Thursday's Trump-Biden debate. Back here on Friday. Hello, Jim.
Also, Nicholas Kristof from The Times, who not only has a great new book, but has written some brilliant columns about Gaza and other things, will join us on Thursday as well. But right now, we're joined at the library desk by Michael Curry. Michael, of course, is the president and CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors, where he chairs their Advocacy and Policy Committee. And we haven't said this on the air, but Marty and I have been trying really hard with our colleagues to get, Jaylen Brown on the show, Jason Tatum, anybody who's riding on a duck boat. And apparently, we finally found somebody. That would be Michael Curry. Welcome, Michael. It's great to see you.
Great. Glad to be here.
Okay, so we got the selfie here, Michael on the duck boat, and we want to know how you pulled this off. I mean, do you have any inside friendships with any of the big honchos, Michael?
Well, I'll tell you, one, I was very fortunate that Mayor Wu and Shogun Itawu invited me to the breakfast that morning. So I got to spend some time. Tito Jackson was there, Amari Parrish-Jeffries, and members of his team. And, of course, many other folks in the community were there to hear the story of the Celtics, talk about their journey. And then Mayor Wu and Governor Healey spoke at that breakfast. So that was phenomenal. I got to walk on the court. I walked by
Celtics that we're talking?
Actual Celtics.
Oh, my God.
I walked on the court by Paul Pierce, and I didn't want to be a groupie, so I didn't run up to him to try to take a selfie. You know how you take the selfie without them knowing?
Yes.
So, I was just honored to be there. And then Amari Parrish-Jeffries and his team had sponsored the duck boats, one of the duck boats, and wanted to honor Juneteenth. So they recognized the 18th championship, and on the side of the duck boat was a celebration of Juneteenth. They invited me to join them on the boat.
Fantastic.
My God. So I will tell you, it is, and I've been to major festivals. I've hosted a music festival here. It is the most unbridled joy that I've ever seen in my life to see millions. Now we know at least 1 million. As you see it from the vantage point of a duck boat, is the joy. And they were black, they were brown, all pronouns, all social classes, and everyone in unison just cheering and screaming. I'll never forget that moment.
So you came on the duck boats. It started down by TD Garden.
TD
and
Garden.
It proceeded right by here. We were so excited. Jim wasn't here that day, but Andrew Cabral and I were here. We're cheering. We're taking pictures out the window. And it went up to the Heinz. So what happened when you got to the Heinz?
So-
was there something inside, or was that the end?
No, so it was the end. So they all took different streets on the right off Boylston to then head back to the garden.
Okay.
So, of course, all those side streets were less people, but just as much cheer, people just as excited. And I got a chance to spend some time with some of the Celtics players that were on the boat.
Wait. Not some of the Celtics. Who did we talk to, Michael Curry?
So most of them were the bench players.
Yeah.
And there were folks who had sort of subbed in throughout I was not on the primary boats,
Okay.
just to be clear.
But the bench
I wasn't
players-
with Tatum and Brown.
Okay, that's okay. But the bench players are pretty impressive,
The
too.
bench players are
Yeah.
pretty impressive. And so, we took pictures with them. We chopped it up with their families. It was a phenomenal experience. So I say to Mayor Wu, to Shagun, to Amari, and Embrace Boston, thank you for honoring me, allowing me to join in that celebration.
Can I say two things? Do you ever see the movie Zelig? We don't talk about Woody Allen anymore. Zelig is this character who is everywhere. You were like the modern day Zelig. And by the way, we couldn't go to the opening night of the Embrace Ideas Festival. Speaking of Amari Paris Jeffries, we went on Thursday when Isabel Wilkerson
spoke.
and Ibram Kendi and Colette Phillips and whatever. And it was a fabulous couple of panels. But it really, and by the way, congratulations to him and them. It was a great event.
Huge.
But
very
you
successful.
it's like.
Well, and part of it is I don't know how to say no. So when you figure out how to say no, tell me, because I'm fortunate that people reach out to me, and I did co-host one of the evenings, the opening night, the honors, Embrace Honors. So when I get to celebrate people who are doing great things and tell their story, I won't say no.
You know, it was one last thing about this. The Globe had a great story about the kids in Boston now who weren't around back in 2008, and how excited these kids were back down at the court. They're 12-year-olds and 14-year-olds. I mean, it was just a really neat story about people's pride in the Celtics, and that most of them are never going to make the Celtics, but they were beside themselves.
What I said on social media, and I'll say this now, we needed that joy. We needed that win. And I know every city, every state won't have it, but when you can watch that unbridled joy in the streets, with everything going on politically, socially, war overseas, there's something about that I think is medicinal.
Yeah.
To be able to let all that stress go and for a day just scream in the streets and yell. And I love the hip hop song, Everybody Throw Your Hands Up.
Yeah.
That to me was the favorite song, because if you saw that at the Garden, to see hundreds of thousands of people throw their hands up in the air was pretty phenomenal.
Let me tell you, if I was riding on a duck boat, I'd be feeling joy too, Michael Curry. Let me just tell you that. So let's go from joy to Thursday night's debate. What are you looking for from these two candidates? And we've talked to you ad nauseum about black voters, and some polls suggest that the critical ingredient, along with young voters, for Joe Biden's election, seem to have some doubts. What are black voters in America looking for to hear from both these guys on Thursday night?
Well, I think, and it's interesting, I studied journalism, speech communications in college, and one of the things we did was deconstruct speeches, and particularly presidential speeches, and we actually focused in on Governor Dukakis and kind of what sealed his fate, the nonverbal communication, all that. So when I think about the debate, all of us will be looking, including African Americans and other people of color, will be looking, one, to make sure that Biden shows up strong, that he's able to answer the questions in a very succinct and powerful and confident way. That as much as it is overstated, is still a concern about his health and his age. So people want to know that he's present and he's able to serve another 4 years. So I think he has that hurdle to cross, and people will be watching. All people, not just Republicans. I think he will. The other thing is, even though the mics will be muted when the other speakers presenting or answering a question, I have no doubt that Donald Trump will be screaming from the other side of the room. So there's no doubt you'll hear him, but it'll be less disruptive than if his mic was hot and he was able to disrupt. But people want to hear from him. I think there's an expectation that Trump will bring the normal Trump. He'll personal attacks. He'll go after Biden's age. He'll go after his son. He'll go after anything and everything he can. As an African American, I'm looking for substance, and I think many of us are looking for substance. What can the Biden administration promise to do in these next 4 years to reposition, to address the challenges and opportunities that African Americans across this country face? Medical debt, education debt, health disparities, housing crisis, mental health crisis, substance use disorder, just the overall price of goods and services that all Americans are facing, but disparately poor people, disparately black and brown folks are the unfortunate beneficiary of economic crises. So we'll want to hear that from him, but he has a great story to tell with lots of historic legislation passed. He doesn't always translate that well for my mother, Mahalia, for her to listen to a debate and say, oh, okay, he has done that for me. He needs to be able to translate better.
You know, Marjorie and I are having a discussion before, I think it was on the air, about the value of the debates, and you say it's too much performance, that it's determinative. You are talking, like Marjorie is hopefully talking about issues. And you mentioned Mike Dukakis, just for a piece of history, for those who don't recall. And by the way, I know I speak for you, Marjorie. We're both great admirers of him as a person,
so am I.
And as a leader.
As a friend.
But the thing you're referencing is when Bernard Shaw was an anchor at CNN, in the debate between Governor Dukakis and George H.W. Bush, asked Governor Dukakis a question. We know you're against the death penalty. If your wife Kitty was raped and murdered, and would you change your position? And obviously, the appropriate answer would start with a motion. And by the way, I don't think I've ever met a politician who cares more about his spouse than Michael Dukakis.
100%.
I mean, it's just his relationship with Kitty is so beautiful. And he gave a Dukakis-like policy answer without the emotion that I'm sure is in him. And it probably sealed his fate, because It was sort of like I still would oppose the death penalty because so-and-so and so-and-so. So do you worry, like she does, that what the takeaway after 90 minutes is going to be, not on all the issues you talked about, but Trump acted like an a-hole and Joe Biden looks old and tired? Are you worried about that?
You know, I'm not as worried because I think that there's a lot of preparation going into this debate, but there's a lot of pomp and circumstance to it too. I think people will want to see certain key indicators. One, that Donald Trump can control his impulsiveness and his personal attacks, which probably he can't. But if he did, he'll just solidify his support among Republicans and maybe shore up some independents who really want an excuse to vote for him.
Yeah.
Right? They're already leaning. They're on one leg leaning for him anyway, and just want to see that he can be presidential. For Biden, it is similar to Dukakis in that sense. He's going to have to answer the questions, which I think is his strength, authentically. He's going to have to be personable. I think you tell a story. When he's asked about his son, or his son comes up or that, you say, hey, I'm a father. And what parent who has a child dealing with substance use disorder is not aching right now, even as they get caught up in the criminal justice system or whatever? Those of you in America, you know that feeling.
Yeah.
And then give the statistics on how many families are dealing with substance use disorder. If he does that, he'll hit home runs. But I think he has to be sharp. All of them, contrary to what they're saying, Donald Trump is preparing too. Right? They're coaching him, although he's uncoachable. And contrary to what they're saying, he's in some room and they're working on him right now.
Talking to Michael Curry.
So my daughter just had her second kid only a couple of weeks ago, and it just hit home again to me how lousy, really, we take care of women during pregnancy, during the time they're in the hospital, during the time they come home after, compared to other countries that have night nurses show up at your house and lactation coaches and all this kind of stuff, which brings me to my hopes for this up at Beacon Hill, the Mass House approving the sweeping maternal health bill. So what could it do?
Yeah, so one credit, I get to walk every once in a while with Representative Marjorie Decker. She'll call me and say, Michael, we need to go for a walk. And she'll meet me over at my office, and then we'll walk through the Boston Commons or walk up to Faneuil Hall. But she's been talking about maternal health crisis for a long time. The Congressional Black and Latino Caucus has been really focused on this issue. A shout out to my good friend, Representative Brandy Fluker Oakley. They've all come together and then now passed the maternal health bill 153-0. How often do you see a bill passed unanimously in the House of Representatives? You know, there's a lot here. Massachusetts is one of the worst states in the country for maternal health. That might surprise people since we have the mecca of health care here in Massachusetts, but we're not. We actually, black mothers in general, and particularly black and brown mothers, have bad outcomes in pregnancies and their babies are dying, or they're in the NICU unit. So we have a crisis. So this bill responds to that crisis by, one, acknowledging the roles of midwives, certified professional midwives, to be more engaged. Now, if you know the history of healthcare in this country, and I teach at a health policy course at Suffolk, part of what we did was we used to have care at home, right, for your grandparents. they delivered babies at home or in more community settings. But as we got very hospital-driven and system-driven, we drove all that care out of homes. Right? I always think about Little House on the Prairie. I don't know why I always think about that when I think about having babies. But I think there was an episode where they had the baby at the house. But driving families into hospitals, and we know that that doesn't work for everyone, that a doula, a midwife, a lactation coach could help you through that process. Our system does not work for many women, and we're seeing it in bad outcomes, both for the mother and the child, and then postpartum depression. To your point, it doesn't just start with a woman identifying that she's pregnant with her provider, but it also, it lasts because the suicide rate among women who are dealing with postpartum depression is significant. And we need to make sure that there's a handheld throughout that process, a midwife, a doula, a lactation coach, postpartum depression specialist. All of that is in the mix in the bill, and there's an opportunity here for the Senate now to work on a negotiation and compromise and pass something significant. We would, again, lead the nation, and then health equity is a part of that, because we know that black women, particularly here and across the country, are suffering higher rates of bad outcomes in pregnancy.
Regardless of income, as we learned a lot from Serena Williams, who's that. By the way, when you just without going into the weeds on this bill, I assume part of this is they mandate that there's insurance reimbursement for these kinds of services that heretofore weren't covered. Is there? Or?
Yeah, so Mass Health is a critical focus of this, to make sure that services are covered under Mass Health.
Which is Medicaid in Massachusetts.
Medicaid in Massachusetts. So one is, we know that. There's other elements that deal with commercial insurance. But the goal here is, one, to make sure that you have a pipeline of providers, so certification, training, to make sure you have quality care so that people are getting the quality they need, to make sure they have the access they need, the care in the right places, at home, in community. The bill sort of touches all those critical tools in equity, right? So access, quality, and workforce and equity.
I just wonder if there's going to be a blowback from organized medicine here or from the hospitals, because one of the things this bill talks about is having more licensing for these birth centers, which are outside of hospitals. Apparently there's only one. I didn't realize there was one in Northampton, and those are great alternatives for people with low-risk pregnancies. So you're going to be in a fight with medicine?
So I think we've evolved. There was a time that I felt like there was such competition. Everyone wanted the patient, right?
Yeah.
And no matter what, they wanted the cancer patient. They wanted the mother that was pregnant. But if all your listeners go to an emergency room, right? Try to get a bed in a hospital right now. And the reality is, it took us all this time to realize that we don't do care very well in this country. And therefore, our system is breaking. So now we need to make sure people have the right care in the right place at the right time, and I would argue at the right cost. It costs less to get you care at home than it would inpatient in a hospital. So I think hospital community is on board with this. I think just today I got a reach out from the Mass Hospital Association looking to do something around maternal health. So my good Steve Walsh and I went to law school, New England School of Law, now New England Law, right up the street. We're close allies and friends on this. I look forward to working with him to figure out how this, once it becomes law, hopefully this year, this session, how we would implement this and support making sure that mothers are healthier and their babies are surviving.
By the way, we've talked to you since you first created, you and some colleagues, but you had to lead this Health Equity Compact. And by the way, the website's healthequitycompact.org if you want to learn more, right? We keep, because we're a little bit more critical of the legislature than you are, is any of this ever going to happen? I mean, this is a major step, assuming this thing gets to Healy's desk before the legislature gets home. This is a major piece of the action, no?
Cautious optimism is what you have when you do government relations, and I've been doing it now 26 years of my life.
Cautious optimism.
Cautious optimism. Okay. Because what happens is, in a 2-year session, really a lot of it gets crammed into that last month, as you know, and there are major bills, the PACT Act and other pieces, mental health, and other pieces that are moving right now. And now they're trying to find if they can compromise, so the conference committees compromise, and then put out a final bill that would then go to the governor's sign. Some things get left on the table, and some important things get left on the table. So my hope is they'll get these big pieces, including maternal health. Again, shout out to Marjorie Decker. They'll get these bills done. They'll be sent to the governor to be passed. If not, then they then have momentum for the next 2-year session, which would start in the beginning of the year. So I'll be honest with you. I used to do bills, legislation full time. It was 7,000 bills get filed a year.
Wow.
And only a few hundred actually get passed in a legislative session. So this is tremendous progress.
By the way, Michael won't say this I understand that, but based on those numbers of bills last year, this was determined to be the least effective legislature in America. And having said that, this would go a long, long way to erasing that thing. This is huge, and I wish you and whoever else is working on this. Can I ask you one more health card question
Yes.
before we get to education briefly? We had Brian McGrory on yesterday, former editor of the Globe. Now he's head of journalism at BU. And his most recent, he wrote original columns on Ralph De La Torre, head of Steward, owning huge yachts and the company buying huge private jets at the same time that people are dying because equipment's being repossessed at the hospital. The latest thing he wrote about was this property, whatever management that Stewart ended up selling all the stuff to and renting back the land, etc. He seemed to be concerned that when these sales finally come up at the hospitals in Massachusetts, that it's not inconceivable that for some there may be no buyers because the economic reality, especially with this property thing, is going to be. And what happens? And forget what happens. Are we prepared, the state, for the possibility that a sale may come, let's say in mid-July, and one or more of these hospitals that are critical to particularly low-income people has no buyer?
So yes, I'm not sure we're ready, but what I'll give a shout out to Chair Cindy Friedman, Healthcare Financing. When I tell you the chair calls me at least once a week with a concern about the Stewart crisis, and she says, Michael, are they engaging community health centers? Are they engaging your patients? Is there a contingency plan, right, to be prepared in case there's some closure, or in your case, your point, Jim, at least there's no buyer? So the reality is there's a task force put together, and I'll be meeting with the head of the task force today or tomorrow to talk about what the implications are. The system was gutted. I don't know if a better word, right? You gutted it of all its value, right? You sold its properties, and now whoever buys it has to sort of rent back or lease the properties that they're in. That was ethically wrong, right? So let's just put it on the table. It's ethically wrong. And now whoever comes in will probably need some incentive. This is where the state comes in. Some incentive to engage in a purchase of a system. No one's really saying that, but I'd anticipate just logically, you're going to have to incent buyers to come into the Commonwealth. And hopefully Massachusetts in the bankruptcy process will have some say and some leverage, particularly if that leverage comes from investment, to make sure that whoever comes in is ethically connected to what we value in Massachusetts and will prioritize patients over profit and over investors.
I haven't thought of this before, but I'm sure you have. If it turns out that, and I don't want to scare people more than they're already scared, because I'm sure they're scared enough of their own. People who work at and receive services from these hospitals are worried about what happens in a month or 2 months, et cetera. A lot of this burden would fall to you, wouldn't it, if it turns out one of these hospitals goes unbought and if the state doesn't step in?
Yeah, I think us is the probably a more appropriate way to say it. So the reason why Commissioner Goldstein, head of Department of Public Health, called me and Steve Walsh from Mass Hospital Association probably about 2-3 months ago, and he said, Michael, I need the two of you to come together and host a series of conversations with your members across the state, because you will bear the burden of whatever happens. So we ended up, the two of us, Steve Walsh and I, with the commissioner, hosted a series of briefings, health centers, hospitals that are not Stewart, I think maybe some Stewart on it, but mostly non-Stewart, talking about we would deal with the overflow. So the reality is people are already, unfortunately, starting to exit the system, right? And they're already starting to now show up in other systems. They're showing some are showing up in community health centers that don't have emergency services, right? So what does that mean in terms of care if you're in the wrong place for the care that you need?
Yeah.
So we have a crisis, and I think part of what I so feel confident in Commissioner Goldstein and the UHHS team, Executive Office of Health and Human Service team, is that they understand that this is a crisis, and we now have another series of conversations they've asked me to co-host that we'll do over the next few weeks. We now need to be prepared, as Cindy Friedman, Chair Friedman said, with contingencies. And for those who don't do risk management and don't come out of that background, means prepare for every scenario. Be prepared no matter what goes wrong so that you're not surprised. And that emergency preparedness lens is what we all need to have now.
Okay, before you go, the Red Sox are doing really well. If they end up winning, remember who your friends are when the duck boats start rolling, okay, Michael? We don't get invited to as many things as you do, so keep us in mind, will you please?
I will absolutely do that. And if I had known you were in the garden area, I had an extra pass, you would have had to fight for the two of you. One of you would have been with me.
Michael Curry, it's great to see you as always.
Yes, thank you very
so
much. We have been speaking with Michael Curry, President and CEO of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers. He's also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors, where he chairs the board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you for the selfie. We were inspired. Up next, John Rosenthal of Stop Handgun Violence. We're going to talk about some judicial decisions recently involving guns, particularly one about bump stocks, and more about trying to enforce gun laws in the United States and change gun laws in the United States. Listen to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
One of the biggest stressors when applying to college is that daunting personal essay. How long should it be? Is the grammar correct? And what on earth should you write about?
It's telling them that I'm a person who is passionate about investing in the future.
I said in the essay that I was a teen mom, and I thought it was very empowering because there's a lot of my classmates that go through the same thing.
Find out how two students successfully wrote their essays on our podcast, College Uncovered. Get it wherever you listen.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, featuring a collection of over 700 artifacts. The exhibition is now open at the Castle at Park Plaza in Boston. Tickets and more at theauschwitzexhibition.com. And National Grid, helping businesses work toward a sustainable future by offering guidance on heat pump solutions. Learn more about how heat pumps can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions at ngrid.com/future.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie, and we're live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. As we said to you repeatedly, we're not at the library tomorrow. We have our annual treat. However, if at 10 o'clock tomorrow the Supreme Court rules on Donald Trump's immunity claims, we will do a live hour from 11 to 12. And on Thursday, Nick Kristof from the Times and Doris Kearns Goodwin, she will be in studio with us to talk about the history of televised presidential debates just hours before the first presidential debate. Joined now at the library by John Rosenthal, longtime gun sanity advocate and the founder of Stop Handgun Violence. John, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me back.
So, John, thank you for being with us very much. So, we have some bad news involving the Supreme Court and some good news. The first is the bad news where the Supreme Court struck down the ban on bump stocks, and people may remember that ban came into being after a massacre in Las Vegas where 60 people were killed and hundreds more were injured by a shooter that was using a bump stock. So what do you make of this one?
It's absurd. The bump stock turns a semi-automatic weapon into as close to a machine gun or automatic weapon as you can have. 60 people dead, 500 people shot, 800 to 1,000 people sent to the hospital, and Congress didn't even notice. So the fact that the majority on the court didn't care. You got to remember that in 2008, Justice Scalia wrote for the 5-4 majority on the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of the free state, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And he said that protects weapons that were made and used at the time of the founders. And he particularly said, I don't mean assault weapons. They didn't exist. They're not protected. And he also said, like all rights, they're not unlimited, and you can put reasonable restrictions on how guns are sold. That's what we do here in Massachusetts. We have the lowest gun death rate in the nation as a result of it. And if every state had the same low gun death rate, the same gun laws, we simply regulate guns like automobiles, inherently dangerous products. We've reduced the rate of gun deaths by 40% since 1994. If every state had what we had, half of the 48,000 gun deaths a year would be prevented without banning anything except for assault weapons and bump stocks. So the fact that the majority on the Supreme Court didn't care enough is absurd, but it's consistent. Remember, this is the same Supreme Court that attacked women's right to sort of choose how they treat their bodies. This is the same court that hasn't ruled on immunity. Remember, Trump's argument on immunity, his lawyers stated that it is within his rights to kill his political opponents. And they still are considering this. So what we all have to understand is all the things we care about, not the least of which is our children, and the fact that every 30 minutes a kid is shot. Every 3 hours a kid dies. Today, another 120 will die of Americans because we don't regulate real guns like we regulate toy guns and teddy bears. If Trump comes back, he's got the courts. Gun violence is going to get worse. Freedom and democracy is going to be diminished. And, we've got to make our children and their future a priority. And everything is on the line with guns, with reproductive rights, with the environment, with freedom and democracy in November.
We will in a second talk about the good news, which, in my opinion, shouldn't be cause for such celebration, other than the fact that this court is so horrible that people celebrated this domestic violence restriction. A guy who has a restraining order for domestic violence can constitutionally be denied a weapon. Seizing on what you were talking about, John Rosenthal, Marjorie and I probably talked more about the importance of Supreme Court nominations than any radio show in America. I am pretty convinced that nobody gives a damn. They care about individual issues. They don't think that the next guy, whoever it is going to pick maybe 1, 2, we don't know, and they might be 40 years old and serve for 40 years. And I'm not sure, and I hope you'll disabuse me, that people who want sane restraint on gun ownership care as much about it as those who want unfettered right to own, Second Amendment absolutists. Am I right or am I not right?
Under 40 voters will be roughly 45% of the electorate in November. They care. These are kids that have never known a day in their lives where they couldn't be shot in school. And all the recent polling shows they care deeply about gun violence prevention. They care deeply about freedom and reproductive rights. They care deeply about the climate. So if they show up, we can stop Trump and the Supreme Court justices that he will appoint if he comes back. I mean, Jim, Marjorie, in our lifetime, the court's gone for the most part.
Yeah.
But not our kids' lifetime. But if Trump comes back, and they care deeply about the court, they
get it much better than we do. I agree.
And so it's about us supporting them and their future. If they come out in record numbers like they did in 18, 20, and 22, we save freedom and democracy. They get a future that they can help control. And in 28 and beyond, they'll be the folks that we're going to be electing.
John Rosenthal, before we get back to, again, this Rahimi case in a second, I want to stay on electoral politics and guns. For David Hogg, a Parkland survivor and incredible activist, 4 years at Harvard, you and he were practically locked at the hip for the time he was
Still
here.
are.
He's now doing some electoral stuff with those young voters you're talking about. You're smiling. What's the feedback on how that's gone?
He's pretty much batting close to 1,000. They've been basically, he started Leaders We Deserve. He is supporting, it's a super PAC supporting Gen Z candidates. And they've been winning. So they're our future. And that has sort of definitely, helped David deal with the trauma of being, a survivor at Parkland, and to begin to sort of have control over his future and the future of America, which, our generation, has sadly, allowed, this environment to take place where they've never been safe.
We'll get back to this case that the Supreme Court did at least uphold this law. I wasn't sure they would, but barring this domestic abusers from owning guns, and it was based on a particularly bad case of this guy that was going after this one woman, going after another woman, shooting up people all over the place. So should we be encouraged at all by the Rahimi decision?
Sure. I mean, clearly it could have been worse. It was an 8-1 decision. I mean,
Clarence Thomas being the one, need I say, but go ahead.
Clarence Thomas. I mean, each of the, the majority on the court have shown that, they actually they've become activists. They care more about sort of their patrons who fly them around in jets and fly flags upside down. I mean, you can't make this stuff up in America. We've got to stop this nonsense, and we have the power to do it in November. So the Rahimi cases, a Texas court, said that this guy couldn't have a weapon. And the Supreme Court, thankfully upheld that. And I mean, there were 5 instances with this guy and guns, shooting it, threatening women. He's a known domestic abuser. So it was a pretty, I think, certain case, although with this Supreme Court, you can't count on anything.
The thing that I hate to, I'm optimistic about almost nothing these days, but the optimism, there was a piece we read in the New York Times, I think by David French, I'm not sure who wrote it, that Roberts, who we wish was taking on the ethical failures of some of his colleagues and refuses to do so, seemed to take on a decision that he signed on to a couple of years ago, this Brune decision, which Thomas wrote, and correct me if I'm wrong with any of this here, where Thomas basically said in 2022, as the writer of the opinion, that for any restriction on gun ownership to be constitutionally permissible, there has to be an historic, I don't know what the next word is, parallel, something precedent for this with our founders for 200 years ago, which to me is so ridiculous, it's unbelievable. It seems to me in this Rahimi decision, the domestic violence case, that the court under Roberts, again, without getting lost in the weeds, I hope, was saying, he's saying you misunderstood what we said. I think what he's saying is we went too far, and we want to clarify that we did go too far here. And I think the words of Coney Barrett were, okay, let's find like an historical analog maybe, but we don't have to be literalists in some fashion. Meaning to me, it opened the door to maybe approval of red flag laws, which should come before them. Do you agree with that, or do you not?
Oh, I definitely think so. And I mean, look, Justice Scalia was no liberal.
Of course not.
And he said as much, that you can't ban guns at the common use of the time of the founding, but you can put reasonable restrictions on how guns are sold, and semi-automatics, assault weapons, none of that existed, and they're not protected. So far, in Massachusetts, we are ground zero. We have enacted the most effective gun laws in the nation. We have the lowest gun death rate in the nation. And if replicable, we're going to save half of the 48,000 gun deaths a year. How is that going to happen? There are 5 seats in the House that need to flip, hold the Senate, and stop Trump and this white nationalist MAGA movement, and we'll get uniform gun laws without banning all guns that will dramatically save lives.
I saw where Congressman, the former Congresswoman from Arizona, Gabrielle Giffords, people may remember she was shot in the head back in 2011 and survived.
Do you know where she was staying when she was here?
No.
Lenox Hotel.
Oh, really?
Peter, our buddy, the door guy.
Oh, my goodness.
I walked out to get my car the other day, and he was hugging her, and it was such a beautiful scene, actually, and she is, remember we met them?
In a restaurant.
Her and her husband
yes,
in New Hampshire during
yes.
primary
I mean,
5 years
incredibly
ago.
inspirational
But go
woman.
ahead, yeah.
But she was here, pushing for gun reform. How is she, what has been her role? I mean, she seems to be like she's all over the place despite having been shot in the head.
One of the most courageous and strong women I've ever met. I actually helped her throw the pitch last Sunday.
You did?
Yes. At,
my goodness.
At Fenway
Park. Yeah, she's a dear friend, and it's unbelievable. I mean, she has no use of her right arm. I mean, she'll never be the same as before the shooting, but she is so deeply committed to gun violence prevention, and she's a hero. And like, even when we brought her up to the State House, Ron Mariano, the Speaker of the House, President Spilka, the Senate, they were almost like tongue-tied. They were so impressed by her strength, her courage, and they basically said, you can count on us in Massachusetts to continue being the leader, and we are going to pass this next gun bill in this session, and thanked her. And now these are folks that, can help continue our incredibly effective gun laws in Massachusetts and fill dangerous loopholes like the ghost gun loophole that we need to close here in
Explain what a
Massachusetts.
ghost gun is, by the way, because I know they're acting on, hopefully acting on it now. Explain what the ghost gun
is a kit that you can buy in the mail and ship the parts to your home. No serial number, not traceable, and it's a very effective handgun like any other.
You can print the parts on 3D printers of your house, can't you?
You can. You can.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things I think I remember about Congresswoman Giffords when she was shot is that other bystanders were able to tackle the shooter when he stopped to reload the magazine. It only took him a couple of seconds, but that was enough for them to tackle him, which argues further for how we shouldn't have these high-capacity magazines.
So assault weapons, high-capacity magazines are designed for two purposes. Outgun police who only carry 17 rounds, and Congress has said you can have 30 or 100 round magazines. Yeah. Law enforcement carries service weapons, handguns. Congress has said have AR-15s, have AK-47s, and kill as many people as you want without having to reload. Well, police die when they're having to reload their 17 rounds. You just can't underestimate how polarized this issue is and how simple it would be to solve. We are the only country in the world that doesn't regulate military weapons and easily concealed handguns. We have more gun deaths in America just since 1975 than all U.S. servicemen and women killed in all foreign wars combined. Wow. And there's no background check. A toy gun can't be sold unless it has a little red dot at the end of the barrel. The AK-47, AR-15, made here in Massachusetts, right by Smith & Wesson, used at Parkland, used in Las Vegas. No regulations on how they are marketed. And, since 1994, when we put up the billboard on the Mass Pike, about 1 million dead from largely preventable gun violence. You saw yesterday that a report came out by the Surgeon General. The number one cause of death for children and adolescents in America are unregulated firearms. There's no species on the planet that knowingly allows its young to die without doing something about it. Americans are unique on the planet. It's our future that we are killing in order to placate the unregulated gun industry. And we were talking about Cerberus. Cerberus,
Stewart Health, yep.
Cerberus means it's a private equity firm started by a guy named Steven Feinberg, who went to Princeton, lived in New York, funds Trump. Cerberus means the three-headed dog guarding the gates of hell. And they own
my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
And they own 20% of the gun industry, including Bushmaster, the weapon used to kill 26-year-olds in Newtown, Connecticut. And that weapon, by the way, it's an AR-15, uses a .223 round. The parents of those 6 and 7-year-olds that I know had to identify their children by their clothing after getting 3 to 11 rounds with a military weapon. And Congress doesn't care. And nor does Trump. He takes credit for stopping all gun safety bills. It is on us to save our kids. And in November, every issue, including this one, can be moved forward in a sustainable, safe way without banning all guns and start saving our children versus just, concerned about our taxes.
John, just a second on the Surgeon General. In that multiple-page production of his, he said we should declare gun violence a public health emergency. The consequence, I think it's really important for anybody in positional leadership to say whatever they can, but the reality is Congress has got to act to effectuate any of that, right? So it's a statement in search of principled people who actually care about other people.
We are 5 seats away from the MAGA white nationalist movement not controlling Congress. So our greatest opportunity to save our kids and the 120 more Americans that will die tomorrow from gun violence, today, tomorrow, and every day, is to change Congress in November.
But that's, just to be clear, to be my usual negative self, obviously the primary obstacle are the Republicans and Trump, but not all Democrats are on board in Congress in terms of sane gun reform, correct?
Not all, but enough to get a universal background check. Like you need a background check to drive a school bus, but not to buy 1,000 AR-15s in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and 32 states. You need, we're a country of people and laws. And the least we can do is at least have a background check to know whether somebody's a felon or not, to not have military-style weapons on the streets, and to replicate, the laws that have been proven, like our car laws, to dramatically reduce injury and death from that inherently dangerous product, to do the same thing with easily concealed handguns and military weapons. It can be done very quickly if and I think there's enough votes in Congress to do it.
Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just, before you go, I was just thinking about this. We talked about this last week when Ticketmaster is doing this nationwide tour, and one of the people it features, besides Tucker Carlson, who I think is a unscrupulous, untruthful journalist or entertainer, if you want to call him that, is Alex Jones, the guy from InfoWars who claimed that the kids in Sandy Hook were crisis actors, and this didn't really happen. The family sued happily and won. But what does that say, I guess, that Ticketmaster would think that was okay? Alex Jones? Never mind Tucker Carlson, but Alex Jones?
I don't know the situation with regard to Ticketmaster and Alex Jones, but I do know the families sued and won $50 million. They're liquidating his estate.
Well, they won more than $1 billion, didn't they? Ultimately, isn't the ultimate verdict there?
The Alex Jones. I'm not sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm not sure, but I can tell you that Sandy Hook happened. I know the parents. And I would say, if anyone is interested, we're a blue state, obviously. What we do in November is pretty much predetermined. But so is the fact that 95% of Americans know how they're going to vote.
Yeah.
The movable voters are roughly 9 million. They're in 6 to 8 swing states. And the largest segment of the electorate that could swing this election are young people. So we haven't talked about this before, but I hired this branding expert by the name of Bruce Mao to come up with a slogan that didn't need to be explained in 22. Like Uncle Sam needs you to vote. It's morning in America. Stop the steal.
So what is it?
America is calling, vote. And if you go to americascalling.org, you can see. And so we raised about $2 million in 22. We put digital ads on kids' phones in swing states. They opened them 14 million times. They watched them 95% through, and 15+% increase in intent to vote among Gen Z candidates.
What's the website again?
AmericaIsCalling.org.
AmericaIsCalling.org. John, thanks for your work for decades and what you're doing now. You're great. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me back.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very, very much for being with us, John.
Thank you.
We have been speaking with John Rosenthal, a longtime gun control advocate and founder of Stop Handgun Violence. John, thanks again for all your knowledge and for taking the time. Up next, retired federal judge Nancy Gertner weighs in on why the Supreme Court is lollygagging, dawdling, running out the clock on Donald Trump's presidential immunity.
Latinos are set to play an enormous role in the 2024 presidential election, but many are worried about the information available to them.
There's a big group of people that is growing. They are not necessarily receiving the same quality of information, not from the government, not from the media.
Fighting for quality information on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Their summer exhibitions explore the power of portrait photography to document LGBTQIA+ stories, and Isabella's archives on queer experience in Boston in her era. On view now. And Emerson Colonial Theater, presenting Kristen Chenoweth in the world premiere musical The Queen of Versailles, with music and lyrics by Stephen Schwartz, playing this summer, July 16th through August 25th. Tickets at emersoncolonialtheater.com.
Trusted, local, news. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We have a staff retreat tomorrow, which means we will not be at the library unless the Supreme Court decides the immunity issue vis-a-vis Trump at 10 a.m., in which case we will be in the air from 11 to 12, hopefully with our next guest who's about to join us now. That, of course, is retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. Judge Gertner is a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Judge Gertner, it's good to see you.
Good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us, Judge Gertner. You know, I said this before, but why not say it again? I still can't get over the fact that we have a former president who tried to overthrow the results of the last election, and he may win the next election without ever having to face justice on whether he overthrew or tried to overthrow the results of the last election, because the Supreme Court is dilly-dallying so much on this immunity case, which maybe will come out this week. But what do you make of the continued dilly-dallying, and what do you think is going to happen with the immunity case regarding the former president's efforts to overthrow the election?
Well, I'll answer your 10 questions succinctly.
Sorry.
I think they thought they had to take it, which was already meant delay. They had to decide it. They could have simply affirmed the district court, D.C. Circuit's decision. They could have easily done that. But they thought that they had to take it. And once they took it, the arguments suggest that the judges were all over the map. There is an easy judicial answer. I think I've talked about this before, which says, I don't know what the metes and bounds of immunity are for a president in all the situations in which it might happen, but I do know that this is not immune. In other words, I don't know what else a president could do, SEAL Team 6, killing, but I know that this overturning an election, the peaceful transfer of power, is not immune. And they didn't have to, in fact, Justice Kagan might be trying to carve out, which would be saying what are official acts and what are private acts. And to the extent that Trump was dilly-dallying with a false elector scheme, those were private acts. The president has no role in that whatsoever. Maybe the communications with Pence are outside that zone. Maybe the Raffensperger call is outside that zone. But so one decision would be, here's a bucket of official acts and here's the bucket of private acts. That would then mean remanding it to Judge Chutkan, who would then have to hold a hearing and even a mini trial as to what is in one box rather than another. That will mean further, no question about it, further delay. In fact, almost any decision they come up with at this point, I think, predicts that it would be impossible or very difficult to have a trial by September. Then there is someone like Justice Gorsuch, whose question was, we are writing a rule for the ages, was absolutely inappropriate. A court doesn't write a rule for the ages, a legislature does. A court writes a rule that maps onto the facts in front of it. And instead, Justice Gorsuch was in my view, la-la land. And then there may well be decisions by Justice Thomas, who believes nothing is immune that Donald Trump ever did in his life. So there will be, I think, multiple decisions. There will be a majority, and the majority could well mean, the most likely majority, I think, is one that will be carved out by Justice Barrett and Justice Kagan, who actually worked together on a number of things to try to come up with what of the January 6th indictment can't possibly be immune. And those would be private acts of a president.
You know, correct me if I misunderstood you, but I don't understand why, when you were the President of the United States, calling the Secretary of State in Georgia, asking him to look for 11,000 votes is a private act, or creating slates of fake electors is a private act when you're doing it as the president.
Yeah, I don't think that creating the fake electors were, and Raffensperger, you're right, probably the Raffensperger call probably doesn't qualify. I was trying to suggest that things that Trump did, calling obviously private actors, like,
okay.
That it's almost like there's a continuum, right? And one side of it is the president calling private people and asking them to do things that are not within the scope of his authority. When the president calls officials,
that's different.
Them to do things that are outside of their scope of authority, that should still be private, but who knows what they will say. And when the president confers with Pence, but asks him to do something outside of the scope of his authority, that should be private, but who knows what they would do. But that, all that I'm suggesting is official to official might have a different resonance. Shouldn't, I might add, but might have a different resonance.
Well, doesn't it matter what you say to the official? If you say to the official, I mean, the facts matter. I'm telling a judge this. If you say to Raffensperger, the Secretary of State in Georgia, please make sure you counted the votes properly, I'd say arguably an official act. When you say, like he did, just find me 11,000 votes,
Absolutely.
which is exactly what I need to win by one vote, I think sane people, assuming there is a majority of sane people in the Supreme Court, would say it was private. I want to stay on this just for 1 second and be moderately optimistic if something is permissible. If they define to some degree what are private acts and what are official acts for which a president has immunity, including that president, private acts for which he doesn't, including that president, does Jack Smith, the special counsel, whatever he's called, have the ability to then amend the charges against Trump to eliminate all the arguably official act charges and thus potentially have Chutkan be able to proceed with this thing?
In fact, let me take you one further. Yes, he can do that. You can amend, you can drop charges at any time. Okay. The other thing he could do is perhaps anticipating the other major decision this week, which will be on the obstruction count, which we haven't talked about, where the issue is a statute that came about because of essentially finagling records in the Enron case, but has broader language than just mutilating, hiding documents, but much broader than that, can apply to something like obstructing a legal proceeding, or whether it has to be only things that have to do with documents. What he can do is, because the false elector scheme charge in the January 6th case involves documents, involves false pieces of paper, he can try to narrow that charge to meet whatever objections the court has. So both cases can be narrowed and go forward. Both the obstruction, the January 6th case, and the January 6th case, insofar as involves immune issues, can also be narrowed. He can do that at any time.
You know, this January 6th case, beyond the impact on Trump, my understanding is, depending on what the court rules, they could invalidate a huge chunk of the hundreds of convictions of what Trump calls the J6 hostages, the insurrectionists. That's correct, right?
That's true. I have not looked that's absolutely true, but we have not talked about the breadth of those investigations. There was an interesting article, it was in the New York Times this Sunday about oblivion, about the, forgetting minor charges. And the question he was raising was whether the Department of Justice, rather than going after virtually everyone who crossed the threshold of the Capitol, should have focused only on those that were obviously doing, violence and not the lesser lights. Now, I'm sure they'll say they made decisions narrowing this, but one can say that, people had done wrong. There's no question that just, surging to the Capitol was doing wrong, but there should have been more careful distinctions made among the people who were prosecuted. Because when the story is told about Merrick Garland, my understanding is it will be that somehow he believed if you had the widest, range of people in the January 6th demonstrations, you could go up the line to Trump. Well, you obviously can't. This is not a mob situation where the guy with the antlers is going to say, "Oh yes, Trump called me." And in addition, they already had
remember him.
I do.
Right. They already had the issues with Trump. So, yes, it may wipe out some of the January 6th charges. I think we all should look at the January 6th charges to see whether or not the DOJ swept too far.
Can we talk about other charges for a second? And Eileen Cannon, there is not a day that goes by. If you're not watching on streaming, Judge Gertner sat back on her chair and threw her arms up in the air. Is there anything that the Trump lawyers ask for a hearing on that she will not grant a hearing on? This is the classified documents case down in Florida. Eileen Cannon, a relatively new federal district court judge appointed by Donald Trump. Almost everybody who's commented, other than like Steve Bannon, suggests this woman is doing everything in her power to help the defendant, in this case, Donald Trump. What's your reflection on her latest considerations, including whether the special counsel himself was even properly appointed by the Justice Department?
I'm actually shopping around an op-ed, which I, finished like a late hour yesterday or the day before. But here's the way it goes. There's no question she's absolutely slow walking the case. There's no question about that. This was the case that was brought I believe it was a year ago, June. It is in fact the simplest case. Classified documents issues are somewhat complicated, but the underlying criminal case is pretty straightforward. How could we possibly be where we are now without a trial date? There are three explanations for her slow walking. One is she's really inexperienced and she just wants to get it right. The other is that she is just not competent and, just doesn't know what she's doing, not just inexperienced, but not competent. And the third is that she's biased to Trump. I've struggled on this program figuring out which one of those it is. And I'm moving much more and more now to the bias tilt, which you were there already, Jim, but I'm, much more reflective.
So why have you moved to my position, Judge Gertner?
Well, let's take the first. She is competent. She's incredibly, her credentials were really good. They were not trial credentials, but she's certainly smart. Is it an issue of an experience? Someone on CNN the other night, another judge Judge Shinlin said, it could be inexperience. She just wants to get it right. An inexperienced judge follows the precedent. Mm-hmm. That's what an inexperienced judge is. You stay in the precedent box. The hearing she's holding on the constitutionality of the special counsel law is overwhelmingly opposed to the precedent. This issue has been picked over for the past 30 years, from Nixon until now. So an inexperienced judge would have given the back of the hand to arguments that already the precedent is overwhelmingly in one direction. So what did she do? She set aside effectively days of hearings. She enabled the great lights of the conservative legal movement to testify. To rather present their arguments as amicus in the case. In effect, I am going to say, it was an audition for her next job. She is auditioning for her next job in front of these people who are who would essentially be the people helping Trump if he makes it to make that decision. So I am leaning to she is extraordinarily biased. She is enabling in her courtroom the arguments that Trump wants to make in his campaign about the special counsel. There's a motion pending to get discovery about communications between Jack Smith, the White House, and the Georgia prosecutors. I mean, these are motions that should have been denied in a nanosecond, and she's not just considering them, but creating a platform for them to be heard. So I'm in the bias camp, Jim. It took me a while to get there, but I'm there.
Welcome.
Okay. Not to go overboard with the two questions at once thing, but what is her next job, and is this unusual? I mean, we don't usually focus on cases like this. I mean, you hear people complain that their judge was biased in their divorce case or the probate court or something like that. But
how about the Mifepristone judge in Texas, another Trump nominee
right,
who barely...
the one that was quoting the Bible in his
Kaczmarek.
Yes, Kaczmarek. But I don't know. I in a big nationwide case like this seems unusual to me.
Well, it's extraordinarily unusual, and that's what I'm saying. An inexperienced judge would have said the law is overwhelming against you, Mr. Trump, and while I may not agree with it, I'm obliged to follow it. Instead, she's given a platform for essentially a conservative MAGA challenge to these issues. The reporting this week was that, in fact, two senior members of her court asked her to not take. And there were reasons for her not taking the case that had nothing to do with the appearance of bias from her rulings before the case was indicted, but had to do with Fort Pierce. That's where the case is taking place. They had to build a SCIF, which is a special room to look at classified documents. There already was one in Miami. So they were saying, inexperienced judge, that there were all these issues, these rulings that you made that were really not fabulous when you began. And Miami already has the SCIF. Why don't you let someone else do it? And she declined. In addition, there's a magistrate judge in the building. Magistrate judges oftentimes do discovery issues. They could even consider constitutional challenges, but only as a recommender to the judge. The judge has the final authority. But she's deferring nothing to this judge. So what hangs in the balance are tons and tons of motions that she's not deciding, and then the motions that she chooses to pay attention to are the ones that Trump's lawyers would love to see a public airing of. It is extraordinary.
By the way, before you ask, I know you have a follow-up question. As you're speaking on CNN, they're showing photographs the Justice Department has just submitted in evidence in that case, where there are boxes with some classified documents tipped over with the documents what's the verb? Strewn all over the floor in the damn room.
It's like near your desks. I've seen.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Nancy Gertner. Thank you.
So one last quick thing, Judge. If Trump loses, and God help us if he doesn't, but I'm hoping he does. If he loses, what happens to this case down the road? We presume she's going to keep going at this post-election, or will anybody ever get rid of her, or what?
So there are three ways that she could be kicked off the case. One way would be if Jack Smith moves to disqualify her, which it sounds like he doesn't want to do, because he doesn't want to be like Trump, moving to disqualify judges, although I think that he should. The second way would be if she makes a ruling, which he appeals, and the 11th Circuit reverses her, and the 11th Circuit has already reversed her twice before, and the 11th Circuit can, as any court of appeals can, say enough is enough, and they can disqualify her. Someone could bring a complaint against her, arguing that she should be removed from the case for incompetence or bias. So there are ways of removing her. They're very difficult. They're uphill battles, but maybe this is the case in which they'll work. I say that this is that just as when we talk about should the Supreme Court be expanded, and everyone will say if the Democrats do it, the Republicans will, and we'll wind up with a court that has 900 people on it. Likewise, recusal of a judge, filing charges against a judge is not something that should be easily done or thought of. But this case may be different.
Judge Gertner, just so you can prepare for next week, if you could come up with a list of issues where you have changed your position and come towards me, we'll just go down the list of those with some. Is that okay with you?
No, it's not okay with me because I evolved not because of your persuasive arguments, but because of additional data.
There you go.
Additional data.
A likely story.
Too bad. He tried. He failed. I like that
Judge
very
Gertner,
much.
it's good to see you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much,
Be well.
Judge Gertner. We have been speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, who knows everything. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a Boston Public Radio contributor, and we're very, very grateful for her time. Up next, CNN's John King. He's going to talk to us about the debate, which they're holding at CNN. He's going to tell us about this great new podcast he's involved with. And Julian Assange, who's coming back to the United States. That's ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Delivering you the news is our business. Playing 20 minutes of ads every hour, not so much. That's because GBH is a public radio station supported primarily by listeners like you. And it takes a lot of work to bring you the quality news and journalism you trust. So, if you can, please consider making an additional gift of support to GBH. Even small amounts add up to make a major impact. Give online at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Andrew Lloyd Webber, Liz Cheney, Supreme Court correspondent Nina Totenberg, and news anchor Chris Wallace. bostonspeakers.org. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst, united around a vision for public access to revolutionary education. UMass Amherst gives students the opportunity to seek solutions to the challenges of today. Learn more at umass.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. To remind you again, staff retreat tomorrow. We will not be at the library unless there's an immunity decision from the Supreme Court, in which case Marjorie and I will do live from 11 to 12. Doris Kearns-Goodwin joins us in studio on Thursday, ahead of Thursday night's debate on CNN, to talk about the history of televised presidential debates. Nick Kristof joins us too. Joined now on Zoom by John King, CNN's chief national correspondent. He's behind the reporting projects, The Battleground and All Over the Map, the latter of which is now a podcast. Thank goodness. Here he is, John, that is, talking in the podcast to Pacey, a voter who works in a meat processing plant in Doylestown, PA, and is a sergeant in the U.S. military.
In 2016, you voted for Trump. And in 2020, Biden. And you got an election in a few months. What are you going to do?
If I had my choice, I wouldn't vote for either. But I will vote for Biden. I will vote for anyone but Trump.
Why?
Well, he tried to overthrow our government. And that's a problem with me. I'm served in the U.S. military. I just have very strong feelings about what being American means.
One of many extraordinary and important interviews that John has done. John, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Happy Tuesday. Good to see you guys.
Hello, John King. So I should correct myself. I said Julian Assange wants to come to the United States. He wants to go back to his home country of Australia after he pleads here and is sentenced. But anyway, let's get back to this podcast. So tell us what's going on with All Over the Map and how we can listen to it.
So one of the things I've been telling my bosses when I come back from these trips is that I just have this, what I view as a gold mine of material. I think one of the great dysfunctions, and this is why I love you guys. I've loved you guys since before you came to GBH, and I love you guys now. Because you let people talk and you listen and you air out debates and conversations, and it's not judgmental, and you understand we can all learn from each other. That is so lost from our politics. We've stopped listening to each other. So if you're a Trump voter and you meet someone who's for Biden, that person immediately is like un-American, they're evil, they're bad. That's not life. That's not real. And so these voters we're meeting, they're actually a lot of really thoughtful people. You might disagree with them on a lot of things, but if you let it air out a little bit, so I'm an old print guy, right, from my AP days. Then I moved into television, and now I'm trying to chase you guys into the audio space because the podcast, I think, allows some of the voters you'll see in our TV piece, or you can read the text pieces online, to just listen a little bit longer and how they got there. So you just played Michael Pacey there. He served in the Coast Guard, and you heard him very bluntly. Trump tried to overthrow our government. I can't vote for Trump. There are other Haley voters who, because their DNA is Republican, they're tormented by it. They voted for Biden maybe in 2020, right? A lot of voters, Trump 2016, Biden 2020, and now they're tormented because they don't like either one of them. But for the Republicans, a lot of their Republican DNA says, oh, I'm probably going to have to vote for Trump, right? But they're tormented by it. So I think when you listen, not just about who people might vote for or are leaning towards, but why and how. And how they get through, how they help themselves through what can be a pretty tortured process is interesting. And I'm learning a ton in this trip, and I'm grateful that CNN Audio let me bring at least a piece of it to the podcast space for a bit.
We're thrilled about it, too. We're talking to John King. You had a question about it?
I just had a question, because I'm obsessed with climate change. Horrible things are going on all around the country. I wonder, since Trump is a climate change denier, if anybody is very concerned about what his presidency could mean for the emergency we're facing here.
I think, Marjorie, you hit on a key point that I think is a real challenge for President Biden, in the debate this week, and then as you go forward. Because, look, this should be an issue for everybody, right? We again, back to the point about listening and debating, we can have a big debate about how much of the quote-unquote solution, how much of the fix should come from government mandates or government money, or how much of it should be market-based, and how much do you bring the private sector together with the public sector. That's a worthy debate that is about 15 or 20 years, maybe 30 years overdue and late, right, from having just how to do it. And I don't pretend to be smart enough to understand the best way to do it. But if you have not been following the world events just in the last few weeks, if you are still have your head in the sand about there's a climate crisis, I don't know what to say to you. So who are the voters who get this more than anybody? Younger voters. Yeah. Younger voters get this more than anybody. As I always tell you guys, my older son is 30, my daughter's 27. They are poles apart politically in how they think and how their brains work, but they both understand there's a climate crisis. And my generation, our generation, has failed to shake the public consciousness and start moving on this issue. And so can President Biden make a point about that on the debate stage and in the final 4 months of the campaign, when a lot of younger voters have adopted the Israel-Hamas crisis almost as a cause, right? If they had a list, climate, abortion rights, LGBTQ rights, tolerance, most younger voters would be on Team Biden, right? A lot of them anyway. But the Israel-Hamas thing has become almost a cause to them. And if you have a cause, sometimes you don't look lower on the list. Right? If you're just a scorecard, it'd be 4 issues Biden, 1 issue I'm mad at him about, then that's a no-brainer in how you vote. I think that's a huge challenge for the president, to try to raise some of the other issues if he wants to win those votes.
So, John, the debate is on your station Thursday night, as everybody knows, at 9 o'clock, which unfortunately is too late for me and Marjorie, but we'll try to stay up, do the best. And Zoe, too, even though she's not in the same age group. She'll be asleep like 4 hours by then. But putting that aside for a second, when I say this could be one of the most outcome-determinative TV debates ever, my memory is so short, I'm guessing I've said that probably every 4 years. What's your take on how significant this really early, I think historically early debate can be?
I think you're right. Look, one of the reasons Team Biden wanted to do it so early was that you have time, both candidates actually, you have time to recover. There's supposed to be another one in September. I assume that will happen. We'll see what happens. But I think, Jim and Marjorie, if you look at this over the course of the last several months, even the last year, we've had a remarkably stable, almost boring race if you're just looking at public opinion polling. The president has improved his standing a little bit of late, but it's very competitive in the national polls, very competitive, slight advantage Trump if you go through the battleground state polls. My argument from my travels is just beneath the surface are so many ingredients of volatility. COVID hangover, economic anxiety, cost of living, the abortion issue can motivate people, the immigration issue can motivate people, Israel-Hamas motivates people, issues we're not even thinking about yet are going to come up in the campaign. Does this debate, stir that under the table volatility, number one? And then just what is the reaction right now? Part of the president's problem is he's the incumbent and people are not happy with the way things are going. They want something different. But when you actually see them next to each other, there's the last 3.5 years of your life in Joe Biden, and there's the 4 years before that in Donald Trump. I think that's kind of a wake-up moment right there. In a race where a lot of people are unhappy with their choices, a lot of people wish they had different, younger, two different candidates. It's going to be a reminder, no, these are the guys. Barring something unforeseen, these are the guys. And I do think it has a race that has been very, very static. I think depending on what happens in that debate, we might be having a conversation next Tuesday about something a little different.
What does Donald Trump say when he's asked by one of your colleagues about whether or not he'll accept the election results?
I think that's one of the big issues. Look, I think both of these candidates will step onto that stage with considerable strengths, and both will step on that stage with glaring weaknesses. For the president, his age is a question for many people. So how vigorous is he? How, back and forth is he involved in the debate? How sharp does he sound? I think the cost of living is a huge question. The president sometimes gets caught up in the numbers because a lot of the national numbers are good for the economy, and he gets almost defensive, like, hey, people, things are better. Can't talk to people like that. They don't feel it. For Donald Trump, I think you raise key questions. Will you respect the election results? Are you really going to pardon the January 6th people who tried to overthrow? You heard Michael Pacey there, tried to overthrow our government, tried to, whatever language you want to use for what happened on January 6th. So I think those are the big questions for Trump. January 6th, respect the election. Can he? I don't want to get caught up in the silly Washington game. Can Trump be disciplined? Trump will be disciplined at times in the debate. It'll be like watching a Trump rally. At times he'll be other things. He's very complicated, to use a polite word. But I think that's a great question. And he's probably going to say, his answer in the past has been, well, I'd like to, but we have to see what happens. As a citizen, I don't think that's the right answer.
So I was fascinated when I read that the CNN debate is going to have 2, I think, 3.5-minute commercials during the debate. And I know that candidates aren't supposed to talk with their staff and stuff. But what do they do?
What are they allowed
on
to
the
do?
Stage. Trump's not going to go over and talk to Joe Biden about his kids or vice versa. Do they just stand there and glare for 3.5 minutes? Or what happens?
I believe you have the option, and I'm not deep in the weeds on the rules on this particular break part, so I could be wrong, but I think you have the option to go use the plumbing if you want to go.
Okay. Go to the bathroom.
Run quickly to the restroom.
Mm-hmm.
And then, look, I think that, it's a commercial enterprise. There will be people out there who say, why are you having ads? I get that. No, that's above my pay grade. But I do think there's at least a moment to take a breath and collect your thoughts.
Yep.
Scribble down some notes. Think what you want to do next. One of the things I'm fascinated by, look, I hope they debate issues. I think the American people really want some answers on some very big issues the country is facing. But these two don't like each other.
No.
And haven't been anywhere near each other. They haven't been anywhere near each other for a very, very long time. So what's going to happen to the electrons in the air, the molecules in the air when they walk on stage together? I'm fascinated by that question.
Yeah, I think it would be very uncomfortable to spend 3.5 minutes staring at your opponent in this circumstance, Jim. You know what I mean?
They'll be giving the other one the finger probably. But by the way, do they even shake hands? This is going to be an interesting start to this thing. You're right?
I don't know. Okay,
It's another great question.
And what do you think is going to be the big, well, you've kind of touched on it already, the economy, I suppose, for Biden and some of these climate things and the January 6th for...
Well, can we stay on the economy for a second? I think he's in a really tough spot, which you touched on, because even if you say, John, here's some great trends that are happening, however, we know it hasn't reached everybody, I worry you lose the attention of the not everybody when you do those statistics, but at the same point, he does want to show there's improvement. So I'm not quite sure how he walks that line. He being Biden, he's walked it quite poorly, as you suggested a minute ago. To date, what's the thinking inside the campaign, as best you know, John?
Well, I think a lot of people around Joe Biden wish that he had not lost what I'll call the Scranton thing. In the sense that, look, some people think that Washington, a president can't do anything. What does the president have to do with the price of gas or inflation? Blah, blah. Other people think, oh my God, Mr. President, why aren't you helping me? I do think that the idea that I'm on your side and that I hear you, the Bill Clinton language was, I feel your pain. You want to know that your mayor, your governor, your president understand that maybe your neighbor's doing great, but you're not. And so I do think that the president has been a little tone deaf on the idea, at least from my travels. I use the word cost of living, not inflation so much, because it's different. You'll meet growing families you'll meet growing families who are really happy. The value of their home has shot way up in the last 5 years. However, they've had a kid and they want a bigger home, but they can't sell and buy in the same market because the other houses have shot up too and interest rates have gone up. And so they feel trapped in their home. That's a cost of living issue that affects the mobility of a family. It makes them grumpy. It makes them grumpy voters. Supermarket sticker shock is still very real in much of the country. So how does the president communicate with that? I think part of it is, can you do anything else, or what are you thinking about doing? Policy, ideas, if you have them. Part of it is, from the Biden perspective, they say Trump economic policies would help the guys at the top, the haves, and do further damage to the have-nots. But I think part of it also is the empathy thing. That show that I know, and trust me, I get up every day thinking about you. I hear you, and I'm trying to find ways to help you.
How much do people care about the Supreme Court, do you think, when you're
talking
to people all around the country?
So I think there's a lot of different ways to get at that. Are we talking about the disconnect of the Supreme Court, the lack of accountability at the Supreme Court? I think that is an issue that the president could raise. I think that if you talk about if you look at the age of the court, yes, Donald Trump put some younger justices on the court, but the next president of the United States is likely to have a pick or two. President Biden has been talking about that more recently. So you have, you don't know which ones it's going to be. So you have a 6-3 majority now. Since the Dobbs decision, 2 years ago yesterday, we know at the ballot box that has almost without exception, and I believe without exception, benefited Democrats. The idea that you don't want the court doing what it did there. Even a lot of people who have more conservative position on abortion rights didn't think the court went too far, or that the court shouldn't be making those decisions. It should be made closer to home. But so I do think the Supreme Court will be an issue. I'm really interested. Is it going to be Clarence Thomas taking trips paid for by a billionaire friend, or is it going to be one line of attack from Joe Biden is going to be that if you live in Florida or you live in Iowa, you live in one of the many states that are now taking new steps to restrict abortion rights or have already taken more steps to restrict abortion rights, that could not have happened without Donald Trump's picks to the Supreme Court. The president's going to press that attack. As to what comes down the road, I think that's a great, interesting question about the future of the Supreme Court.
John, last thing from me. We've mentioned more than once in our discussions with you, there was a young Associated Press reporter in 1988 who broke the story of Michael Dukakis' selection of Texas Senator Lloyd Bentsen as his running mate. That young AP reporter, by the way, was John King.
He's gotten old.
What's your, not that old, what's your sense of who are the finalists for Donald Trump?
You hear a lot of talk. We have great reporters doing this. I make a few calls on this, but I try to stay out of other people's lanes when they have jobs. It's one of the things I've learned as I get older. But we have some great people, the beat reporters, who say that right now you hear a lot about Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota. You hear a lot about J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio. And interestingly, we're not hearing any women on the final 2 or 3 list as we go. Vance makes a lot of sense to people in Trump world because he's a very good communicator on television. I go back and forth on that. So when Trump picked Pence in 2016, most people think of Trump as reactive and visceral and impulsive. Remember, there was the threat of a brokered convention. The Ted Cruz forces and other people were trying to see anything they could do at the convention to take it away from Donald Trump. And he picked Mike Pence, a middle of the country, Christian conservative, establishment figure, and it quieted all of that. Trump actually did a very strategic thing there. That was smart in the moment and took a lot of air out of the let's get Trump balloon. So what does he think? Is he thinking, is there a strategic choice, right? Tim Scott a long time ago, can you make inroads among African-American voters? A lot of people think, well, shouldn't he put a woman on the ticket? A lot of people view Vance, there are a lot of people saying, well, wait a minute, it's the same thing, right? Why would a MAGA guy pick a MAGA guy? But sometimes that works. Bill Clinton picked Al Gore. Exactly. It was another Southern guy, another moderate, and a lot of people said, what are you doing? What are you doing? And it worked out quite well for them. So I would love to have 5 minutes with Donald Trump, almost say off the record. I'm not supposed to do that because we're in the transparency business. We want to air, just to actually get the truth about, how he actually views this choice. Is he doing it electoral college? Is he doing it strategic? Is he doing it, Mike Pence in his mind betrayed him. I want somebody who'll do whatever I tell them to do. That would be a great truth serum interview.
One last thing for me. Is there any chance we'll see an ad with all of the former Trump people who have said they would never vote for him again but a subgroup of those who said they'd vote for Biden. Can you imagine that happening, or is that a bridge too far for people who may not like Trump but are still Republicans?
Oh, I think you'll see a lot of super PAC space out there, and maybe even Biden campaign space trying to go after Republicans who have a hard time voting for Trump. I mean, these Haley voters, I've told you in my travels, these Haley voters, they're tormented. They don't like either one of them, and they could vote for Biden in 2020 because it was an idea. It's hard for a Republican to vote to re-elect a Democratic president. So I do think that'll be one of the targets. They have a whole lot of people who work closely for Trump, or other mainstream establishment Republicans saying can't do it.
Okay, you watched the parade the other day? Yes or no?
I did watch some clips of the parade. And I watched them at Fenway Park last night, and I think that juice helped the Red Sox. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Boy, you can take the boy, as they say. I'll tell you.
You know, John, it went right by us here at the library. It was a big thrill. People were like 20 feet
See what I have
deep.
on my desk?
Oh my God!
Our mug.
This is how good I told you I have one at home. But this is how good. This is how good. I gave during the drive, and this thing came like that.
Hey,
I mean, I'm still waiting for Amazon to deliver things that I ordered. Thought they were supposed to come a month ago, and I got this like that. It was great.
You know, most people drink only with the right-hand handle for obvious reasons, John. If you know what I mean. Exactly.
Is it coffee or is it Irish whiskey? We'll debate that for the rest of the day.
John, that was a thrill. It's great to see you, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care of yourself.
Thank you so much, John.
Be well.
We've been speaking with CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, behind the reporting projects all over the map and the battleground, and that's what the
new podcast
is, all over the map, so you can hear voters talking about their decisions for 2024. And they are. That's what's so upsetting to me. People that are voting for Trump sound so nice and normal. I don't get it. Anyway, up next, we are opening the phone lines and text lines. Odds are good that you will end up at least one summer cookout before Labor Day, probably next week on 4th of July. Well, not everybody is thrilled about what you have to eat at those summer potluck cookouts. I'm going to get your thoughts next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, journalist and author Sebastian Junger has reported from war zones. He has written about the meteorological hell of a perfect storm, and he has been death-defying, bringing audiences along with him. But in his latest book, Death is Not Defied, it is palpable and personal. He writes about his brush with death and a soul-changing encounter with the afterlife. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Their summer exhibitions explore the power of portrait photography to document LGBTQIA+ stories, and Isabella's archives on queer experience in Boston in her era. On view now. And Safety Insurance, offering a variety of home insurance products to cover your home's increased value. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Again, we're not at the library tomorrow. We have a staff retreat, our annual retreat. However, if the immunity decision comes down in the 10 o'clock hour in the Donald Trump immunity claim case from the Supreme Court, Marjorie and I will mosey on over here and do a live hour from 11 to 12, and I think Judge Gertner will join us as well to analyze the impact of the decision. But for a change of pace, if you're anything like Lydia Bastianich before Thanksgiving, you started setting up your July 4th cookout table yesterday. We're going to end the show by opening the lines to hear from you about the summer barbecue, the cookout, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Kara Baskin, that was a really negative piece for Kara, I thought.
Oh, yeah, she's getting, it's very controversial of the comments on the Globe.
Oh, they are?
Yeah,
You'll tell me in a minute. She was lamenting the sun-baked event altogether, that there were health issues, cleanliness issues, all these things. She says, she didn't use this word, screw the potluck, we should just all order pizza delivery instead. But what would summer be without the charred hot dogs fresh off the grill, which I love, the ice cream that's melted to soup, a bowl of egg salad that's gone by. By the way, when temps hit 90, food safety experts, I don't buy this, say that egg salad you've had sitting out on the picnic table should go in the trash after just 1 hour. Not for me. Summer cookouts, the good, the bad, and the potentially poisonous. The number is 877-301-8970. Can I mention an issue that she left out?
Sure.
Before you read the comments? Thanksgiving is a nightmare. And the reason Thanksgiving is a nightmare is primarily because of the political differences in the era of Donald Trump. But, and what makes it worse, you're in an enclosed space. The beauty of cookout is you can walk away from the people who you find most objectionable, and they can walk away from you. So I have to say, I'm not exactly one who loves socializing, as you know, Marjorie. There is nothing more fun than a summer cookout. Would you agree?
Well, I like summer cookouts, but she's, making me kind of get a little nervous about these things. I mean, she's talking about how when it gets really hot out like it is today, and you got a bunch of potato salad or maybe pasta salad sitting out in the sun, and after a while it takes on sort of a villainous sheen, and then, you don't really know if you should eat it anymore.
You ever read an obituary where it says cause of death, spoiled potato salad?
Well, you could get kind of sick of it. You could sick from it, I should say. And then you got the flies that are kind of flying around the frosting, the cupcakes, and all that kind of thing. So I was all enthused about July 4th potluck, but now I'm.
So what are the comments saying? You said there were a lot of comments.
Well, there are a lot of people that said that they think this is obnoxious. That you can go to a potluck and people make wonderful things, and you should stop complaining about it. And if you're that nervous, just don't eat the deviled eggs that have been sitting out there. But
or don't eat a fly.
And then the grill that could be really dirty, and you're in a neighbor's house and they're cooking the hot dogs.
Can I speak to the dirty grill, please?
Yes.
Some grills are not, and I've experienced this, are not scraped as they should be from the last thing. But you know what happens? There's a flame. And what does a flame do?
The flame just kills all the germs.
Kills all the germs.
Yeah.
So what is the big deal? I mean, I really don't get it. By the way, I like cleanliness. I'm not obsessed. I wash my pits. What are the other things? Little bits? What are they called?
Oh, the dirty bits.
Dirty bits,
the dirty
exactly.
Bits,
but
right.
I don't get this at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's some of the commenters are saying Kara Baskin obviously has a terrible collection of friends and family.
Well, that's not nice. That's not
nice. The
nice.
potlucks they've been to are nicer, and several people have said, it depends on whom you invite to your potluck. You have to invite people that are going to bring you nice things that aren't going to get ruined in the sun. But it is true. People now, especially after COVID, if you have somebody they got their tortilla chip and they scoop into the guacamole and they eat half the chip and they put the other half of the chip back in the guacamole.
Do you know what that's called?
Double dipping.
And here is a Seinfeld episode. As Zoe said before the show, there's got to be a Seinfeld episode for this discussion. Here is George being confronted about double dipping.
What are you doing? Did you just double dip that chip? Excuse me? You double dipped the chip. So? That's like putting your whole mouth right in the dip. From now on, when you take a chip, just take one dip and end it.
Well, I'm sorry, Timmy, but I don't dip that way. You dip the way you want to dip. I'll dip the way I want to dip.
Give me the chip!
Hey!
877-301-8970. That's one of the more memorable, I think, Seinfeld kind of moments. How do you feel about these summer cookouts? Again, you're not talking to Mr. Social here.
Yep.
It's among my favorite things. Among my favorite things? Is that right?
Among
yes.
your favorite things.
Favorite things that happen all summer.
Okay, here's Tony from Holden. Here come the purity police.
Exactly.
Hide the potato salad.
Exactly right.
But then another texter says, I can't eat anything homemade unless I know what the maker's kitchen looks like.
Are you kidding me?
No, that's absolutely serious. And then Anita from
doesn't Karen mention that too? Somebody's kitchen may be dirty?
That's right.
So what?
What does their kitchen look like?
So what?
Yeah, where'd it come from? Here's Anita from Cranston. The most important food question is what cocktails will you be serving Thursday for the debate, she says.
That's a very good point.
Because that is a very good, I may have to get up to tequila for the debate, Jim. I think there's no other way to go.
By the way, we were talking to John. I'm thrilled that there are 2 television commercials. A lot of people complaining 3.5 minutes. Doesn't you think it relieves the stress in the debate?
To be drinking?
No. That actually
I'm
is.
sorry, I was reading the text. What
No,
was the
that's
question?
fine. I was saying the commercial breaks will help relieve the stress, but you had a better answer than I did. The drinks will help relieve the stress.
Well, I think the 3.5 minutes, that's what I really want to know the next day of the debate. What did Trump and Biden do during the 3.5-minute breaks?
Neither of them drink, I just realized for the first time. Isn't that right?
I know Trump doesn't drink.
I don't think Biden drinks either.
I didn't know about Biden.
Elaine in Somerville, you're first. We're talking about the summer cookout inspired by Kara Baskin, her column today in the Boston Globe. Welcome.
Thank you. I have to say, Jim, that when you're wrong, you're really wrong.
Oh, that makes me feel so good. Thank you.
This business about the egg salad in the sun and all of that. I actually have a friend who ate some egg salad, or I don't know if it was tuna salad. Maybe it was even chicken salad. The point is, it's not the egg or the tuna or the chicken. It's the mayonnaise.
Yeah.
Mayonnaise,
and
that's right.
The mayonnaise, actually, he was paralyzed. He didn't die, but he was paralyzed.
Paralyzed?
Wait, he was not paralyzed. Elaine, I'm sorry. He was paralyzed by mayonnaise?
Mayonnaise.
Yes.
Exactly. That's what I meant to say.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It has this. It actually has a medical name. I don't know what the medical name is.
Oh,
But
it's
this
called
is
mayonnaise, I believe. Is that not the name of that? Elaine, raise your right hand. Raise your right hand and tell me your friend was paralyzed from mayonnaise.
I visited him in the hospital while he was paralyzed from bad mayonnaise.
How long was he in the hospital?
Years.
You know, I think he was there about a month. I don't remember exactly.
A
how long.
month?
It was not a short visit. It was not a short visit, and it took a whole year before he came back from it. And so what I'm saying to you is, don't tell the public that they should go ahead and eat bad mayonnaise.
Had I known that it would cause paralysis, I might have taken a different position. Elaine, we're going to check into this, aren't we, Zoe? And find out what if it's an aberration or not. Elaine, thanks for the call. Hope your friend is fine, by the way. Thank you.
A lot of battles among the
Over what?
And the commenters at the Globe.
What?
Here's one who says, you never know. There could be a cicada invasion right after the comet falls on everyone at the potluck. So I am staying
They're
away.
exactly right, by the way.
And then somebody else says, it seems your germophobia is definitely the main cause of your disdain for potlucks. I can't imagine not enjoying a cookout. So there you go. There's a lot of disagreement about this.
By the way, if there's anybody, we, as I often say, we almost never take calls out of order. But if someone has been paralyzed by mayonnaise, we will put you at the top of the list because we'd like to hear as we're doing research on what the prior caller had to say.
We've got people texting to us, Jim. Here's one that says, I avoid restaurants when the temperatures get really high. Got food poisoning once because the food not sufficiently refrigerated. Boy, it's going to make me really
Can you
nervous.
write that person back and ask how long they were paralyzed by the...
I don't know. Okay, Greg in Foxborough, thank you for calling.
Sure. Well, excuse me. Now you've made me mayo nauseous.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was actually calling with a grilling tip.
Oh, please do.
Yes, if you cook, you want to clean your grill before you cook, not after you cook.
Well, of course.
Don't worry about what was there last week. So what you want to do is get, at the beginning of the summer, get a $1, $2 aluminum foil pan, that big, that would hold, say, like a turkey.
Yeah.
And you invert that on your grill surface.
Oh.
And so instead of reaching a temperature of around maybe 500, it gets upwards of around 800.
Ooh.
And so if you let that sit for 5 minutes while your grill is heating up, you pull the pan aside, and all you have is white ash to brush off.
Wow.
Okay.
That is...
The baked on food disappears.
Okay, Greg.
That is brilliant.
Since you seem very knowledgeable on the subject here, I have a question. Dan from Watertown says, PSA about metal grill brushes. They leave metal wires in your cheeseburgers. Better to use wooden brushes or even half an onion to scrub your grill.
Well, can I tell you what? Wait, if you don't do what Greg does, Greg, you know what the secret to get all the crap off the grill, if you don't do what Greg did? You crumple up a piece of aluminum foil and you scrub the grill with the aluminum foil. You ever tried that, Greg?
I've not, but it makes sense. The tip that I had came from America's Test Kitchen.
Oh.
Pretty reliable.
There you go.
Source.
Well, thank you.
But your Dan in Watertown
Yeah.
has good concerns there. I don't really worry about wire fibers in my burger because I'm going to smear mayonnaise all over it anyway. So what the hell is this?
Exactly. That's going to kill you as it is. That's a good point. You know, Greg, thanks for the call. You know, Zoe, did you have this idea for my post-retirement? This is actually a brilliant idea. Zoe's suggesting my retirement is as one of those TV attorneys. Can you look? I look at the camera and I say, if you've been harmed by mayonnaise that's been left out in the sun too long, just call Jimbo.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Did you get botulism from mayonnaise?
Zoe's checking it out. I don't know.
Because one of the texters says it's a paralyzing disease.
Oh.
Yeah, it produces skeletal muscle paralysis. I don't know anything about
Does anybody at the
botulism.
library know anybody that's been paralyzed by bad mayonnaise?
Yeah,
Raise your hand.
But my friend, somebody.
Oh, it's only about half the crowd. Okay,
There you
good.
go. My husband's friend at work had a whole wedding party to get violently ill from tainted food. Doesn't have to be an outdoor activity.
That's ridiculous.
And I made everybody
That's
sick.
like saying getting hit by lightning. You know?
When I was at college, I made everybody sick with clam chowder.
You did not. You
I
never
did.
told me this.
I
What
did.
happened?
Yeah, well, it was one of those co-ops, you know. We had take turns cooking and cleaning and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things I cooked was clam chowder, and everybody got sick.
What'd you do wrong with it?
I think something was wrong with the clams, Jim.
Oh, well, that could be a problem. By the way, food safety news. Authorities in
There you go.
Authorities
Botulism.
in Saudi Arabia have blamed contaminated is different. Mayonnaise. How do you say mayonnaise again? Thank you. For causing an outbreak of botulism. So actually there's some truth into what you're saying there. That's what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Carol from East Providence said the same thing. Botulism. So the friend that was in the hospital, Jim, you were making fun.
I wasn't making fun.
Okay,
I was
you were
asking a question.
suspicious, and apparently you could get botulism. So there you go. Don't eat any mayonnaise on 4th of July. It's going to be kind of hard not to eat mayonnaise on 4th of July because the potato salad, the coleslaw, the hamburger. A lot of people put mayonnaise on their cheeseburgers.
That is disgusting, by the way.
Mayonnaise on cheeseburgers?
Disgusting.
That's my favorite thing.
No, it is
I
not.
love it.
Is that really
Absolutely.
true?
Smear it over the
Can we
the
talk
bread.
about mayonnaise-based salads for
I
a
love
second? I know it's not our
mayonnaise.
topic.
Mhm.
Potato salad, I'm fine with. Okay.
Uh-huh.
How about nothing? Pasta salad. Does that do anything for you at
I love
all?
pasta salad.
With mayonnaise?
I've had it with mayonnaise. I've had it with olive oil. I've had it with all different things.
You've
I
had
love
pasta salad with olive oil?
Did I actually say I just dipped a hard-boiled egg directly into the mayonnaise? Did I say that?
No, but I'm sure you would. That's the case.
But that would be in my own house. That would be in my
Yeah,
own
this
house.
discussion is rather out of control, but let's see if Susan from Northborough can help in any way. Hello, Susan.
Hi, guys. This is, that's petty.
Yeah.
Yes, I can help. And by the way, pasta salad with olive oil is yummy.
Oh, yes, okay. It is. All right.
Okay. I have some advice.
Please.
Eat early.
That's
Eat
right.
Early. Just before it gets hot, just rush the table with the potato salad and eat early.
That's actually pretty good advice. That's good.
I know, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah, just be the gavone, as they say in New York, who would eat, just rush the table.
Be bold.
And secondly, Jim,
Yeah.
I happen to know
Yeah.
that you would eat the leftovers of people in a restaurant who've gotten up to leave, so I think you're safe doing anything.
What is that? You think I'm going to be embarrassed by that?
He's eating off people's plates.
But-
It was
Oh,
so
no,
embarrassing.
No. I'm not saying, listen, Jim, I agree with you 98% of the time.
Yeah.
No embarrassment here.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that knowing that you maybe have eaten something that was tainted with someone else's germs, you're good with the potato salad.
I am totally good with it. Susan, thank you. And by the way, you remember many years ago when we were on NECN and did that show that absolutely nobody watched, Marjorie?
Yes.
And you and I went to Johnny's Luncheonette.
And you ate off people's
I was eating
plates.
off people's plates
Yeah.
as we were interviewing
Yeah.
them. And did anybody object to that?
They
no.
did. They did object
No,
to
they
this,
actually
Jim. They
did
said,
not,
what are you
Marjorie.
doing? You have your fork in the middle of my
I didn't have my fork. It was my
cheese
fingers,
omelet.
actually.
It was
I was
disgusting.
eating fries off people's plates.
Now, I
Best
tell you-
corned beef hash, by the way, in Greater Boston. Johnny's Luncheonette.
Johnny's
It's really
Luncheonette is a
good.
great place.
Homemade.
Absolutely, in Newton Center there. So Janet in Brighton says, Dan is correct about the metal grill brush. She knows someone who got a grill brush wire in their throat.
Did I ever tell
and
you I had
then
to be... Oh, go ahead,
Paul
I'm sorry.
from Worcester says, use a nylon grill brush to make sure you get your daily dose of microplastics.
I hesitate to tell you this story, but it's related. I don't think I've ever told you, but I know it'll make you happy, so I'll tell you. Do you know that when I was a little boy, single digits, I was rushed to the hospital because a bristle from my toothbrush got stuck in my throat True.
I did not know that.
What do you think of that?
How is that? I never heard that story before.
That's
I thought
shocking,
you'd
actually, that you
exhausted your
hadn't.
list of stories.
I'm going to tell that another 10,000 times.
Our staff is now concerned, though, about
What?
the retreat breakfast tomorrow morning with Jim's fingers on everybody's plates.
By the way, and also, in a moment of seriousness here, if you wash your hands, why does anybody care if you put your hands in their food? Why would you care?
Because some people like to eat their own food without somebody else coming to take it, Jim. That's
Well, that's
why.
an issue, but it's not a health issue. Do you wash your hands before you eat?
I try to wash my hands.
Well, I try to
before
wash my
eat,
hands too. So
Okay.
I would say to all of our staff at the retreat tomorrow, don't be troubled. It's fine. My hands are washed. All is good. Beaver, I believe, in Forge Village. I have no idea where that is, but we're thrilled you called. Hi, Beaver. What's up?
Hi, how are you?
I think I'm good. Thank you. Marjorie's pretty good too.
Good. When you're at an outing like this, you have to pay attention to the 3 original preservatives: vinegar, salt, and sugar. If they're all heavy in that, you shouldn't have anything to worry about. As far as the potato salad goes, if you take 2 stainless steel bowls and put a handful of ice in between them and put the potato salad back and cover it, you shouldn't have any issue with it.
Brilliant.
Say that again?
You get 2 stainless steel bowls.
Yep.
In one, you put ice, and then you put the second bowl with the potato salad inside that bowl, and you're perfectly fine.
And when you see the sweat stop on the bowl, you replace the ice.
Beaver, that is a brilliant... Is Beaver your birth name, or is that a nickname?
Yes, it is.
And if I may, why did your parents choose that as your first name?
Because my mom was a good little Indian.
Okay, thank you for that information. Beaver, we really appreciate it. Do you have anything else you want to add to this?
This is from the USDA knowledge article. This is from a texter. People often think mayonnaise is the cause of foodborne illness from chilled foods like chicken, tuna, egg salad, potato salad, spread on bread, luncheon meats, etc. However, because mayonnaise is made with acid, vinegar, or lemon juice, it tends to prevent bacterial growth. Usually, it's the meat, poultry, fish, or eggs out of the refrigerator for more than 2 hours that is the culprit, Jim.
Sort of undercuts the premise of this whole segment after that first caller, doesn't it? Sort of we have to erase this from the podcast.
It's the redemption of mayonnaise,
No,
Jim.
it was a great call. Okay, fine. Enough of the mayonnaise. We're done.
I love the mayonnaise.
We're done. I know you do.
I think that's wonderful.
Okay, fine.
Can we hear it one more time?
No.
Come on.
Okay, that's enough. That's just about enough.
Thank you.
Reality is, you're probably always going to be busy with something, so just go ahead. Make that time right now. We promise the experience will be so quick and so easy. 888-995-9272, classical.org.
WCRB exists because of you. And W.J. McDonough Fence, providing a wide range of fencing options for the greater Boston community for 40 years, including handcrafted custom cedar wood fencing. More at McDonoughFence.com. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at Xfinity.com.
Classical Radio Boston is WCRB-FM 99.5 HD1 Lowell, Boston, WGBH-FM HD2 Boston, WCAI-FM HD2 Woods Hole, WJMF-FM HD1 Smithfield, Providence, and at classical.org.
It's 89 degrees outside our Brighton studios. Maybe it's a little cooler if you've made it up the coast near the ocean. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for letting us bring the music to you. I want to give you something that comes from that 3 CD set we've been talking about.